Stuff here. Septic systems, wow. So yeah, just to reiterate, my name is Brian Corwin, and I'm the director of the Williamson County Department of Sewage Disposal Management, and we regulate all septic systems in Williamson County. Before I forget, over here to my left, this is Shauna Mathis. Shauna is our office manager. So usually if you call our office, you're going to talk to Shauna or one of our other ladies up front. So now y'all can put a face with a name with Shauna. So yeah, today, kind of want to have a few objectives to talk to you about, some of the things that we want to cover today. Very broad, a lot of information. And I'll tell you too, as I'm talking, if you have questions, feel free to interrupt, raise your hand as we go through. The more questions, the more interaction, I think the better the discussion is, and the more people learn. So that's kind of how I like to conduct these things. So I'll talk about our department, what we do, talk a little bit about what septic systems are, talk about our regulations, how septic systems impact your job and what you do. We'll talk about disclosures, which is a big thing for y'all, and just kind of some miscellaneous odds and ends. So who are we? So our department, who are we? What do we do? Why do we do it? How do we do it? Who are we? We are a division, well, not so much a division. There's a breakdown like this. There's a state agency across the entire state of Tennessee, the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. They regulate septic systems across the entire state of Tennessee. In Williamson County, we're what's called a contract county. We have a written contract with TDEC to implement the program within the jurisdictional boundaries of Williamson County. So we are a contract county, been that way since the early 90s. So we have our own program, we have our own staff, our own regulations, our own fees, our own permits. We do everything in-house that the state would do all across the state. There's about 11 contract counties across the state. Most of them are in the bigger metropolitan areas, larger cities. The reason that we went contract and took over the program, way back in the 80s, we had a lot of failing systems in Williamson County and Franklin. And so the county took the program over from the state to get a better handle on that, okay? So that's who we are. In our office, we're kind of part of a bigger umbrella department in Williamson County. So the Department of Community Development is a bigger agency, okay? And there's 5 kind of sub-departments underneath that, all that have to do with the building community. So there's the planning department, there's planning and zoning, there's the codes compliance who enforces zoning regulations, there's the engineering department that does stormwater and things like that, building codes, that's your building permits, your building inspectors, and then you have our department, okay? And we regulate the septic, okay? And one other thing about the septic, just to realize, in the unincorporated part of the county, there is no sewer service. Y'all are probably already familiar with that. So if you're in the unincorporated part of the county, most likely you are going to be served by a septic system, okay? Our department is also governed by the Williamson County Board of Health. They're the ones who promulgate our rules, our regulations. They're the only ones that can grant any kind of variances to the rules and regulations. They adopt our fees, things like that. So they kind of oversee us. And this is kind of a diagram of our staff. I know it's a lot of information, not really wanting to get details. I just want you to see a couple of things. As we're broken down into several different divisions, and we have a lot of staff. Fully staffed, we have about 20 people. And they're kind of broken down into, we have a group of soil scientists. We've got 4 licensed soil scientists on staff and 1 soil science technician. And to kind of compare that, there's about 4 soil scientists that the state has for the entire state of Tennessee. We employ 4 just for our one county. We place a big emphasis on the soil aspect of our program, and we'll talk about that in a little bit later. We have a division of engineers. We've got a couple of guys that do engineering work. One guy has his PE, and that's what my background is. I've got 2 degrees in engineering, and that's what I started doing. So they review engineer design plans and do engineering things associated with septic systems. We have a division of plat reviewers that review subdivision plats and property approvals and things like that. And then we also have our group of inspectors. They're the ones that are actually out in the field inspecting systems as they're being put in the ground. And then we have our support staff. So we have a lot of folks in our office, very diverse group of people. So what do we do? That's who we are. What do we do? We regulate all aspects of septic systems in the county. So, and I'm I'm focused today on individual septic systems. So it serves an individual residence and systems on that individual property. Not these big community systems that y'all may get involved with in your real estate transactions. These centralized systems or step systems, that's a whole nother topic and another division that kind of oversees those. So we do the individual systems that are on that individual property. And our philosophy and our approach is kind of a cradle to grave approach. Everything from the raw piece of land and getting that raw piece of land approved for a septic system, putting in a system, designing it, inspecting it, and throughout the life of that property, all the way till it's ever going to be hooked to sewer. So if you're going to do anything else to that property, do additions, so it's forever with that property that we're involved in some form or fashion. And I mentioned before about the unincorporated parts of the county. Okay, we regulate all of Williamson County. So there's some systems that are in the city limits, some in the city of Franklin, Brentwood, Fairview, the other municipalities. Even though that's a city jurisdiction, we have the regulatory authority over the septic systems, not the city. So we govern septic systems throughout the entire county. And so why do we regulate septic systems? Well, there's a multitude of reasons. The main charge that we have is for the protection of public health and the environment. That's our number one goal. That's the number one thing that we're trying to do. So it tops everything else that we're trying to do is that's our main mission: protection of public health and the environment, for disease potential, groundwater contamination, surface water contamination, things like that. Also public service, educating people about how to maintain their systems, educating people like you that are involved in that. So we do a lot of that as well. What does that involve? A lot of stuff. It's more than people realize. I'll never forget when I first started this job 23 years ago, I didn't even know what a septic tank was. And I wasn't here but a few months, and I looked at my boss and I'm like, all of this over a septic system. I couldn't believe it. And there's so much involved that people don't realize. I mentioned the Board of Health. We also license people. So we license soil scientists, we license installers. There's pumpers that go out and maintain systems. We license those folks. The inspections I mentioned, systems installations, recertifications, things like that. Property approvals is one of the biggest things we do anymore. I mean, there's so much growth going on in the county, so much development, approving properties for septic use, the permitting. So there's a multitude of things that we do. It just covers the gamut. And it's not just going out and installing a system. Yes, sir.
In your presentation later, Brian, are you going to go over the steps of getting approved?
I am. Yep, sure am.
Thank you.
So we talked about jurisdiction a little bit. Again, limited availability. I mentioned earlier, in the unincorporated part of the county, there's no sewer service. There's none out there. And there's not going to be. I've had multiple conversations with Mayor Anderson over the years. As long as he's there, the county will not be in the sewer business. For a multitude of reasons. I mean, that's a big thing, but there's also limited ability to discharge wastewater. So there's nowhere to really go with it. So our being in the sewer business is with septic, okay? About 50% of Williamson County residents are served by septic, okay? And that's an older statistic. I haven't done the numbers here recently, but I'd say it's pretty close to the same. So a large majority of the population that live in the county. Of course, y'all are familiar that I just throw this up to people see how big the county is and where some of the incorporated areas are. It's a little bit older map, so some of that's changed a little bit, but we have the jurisdiction of all of it. So just a few little interesting facts and figures that I like to point out to people. About 25% of the entire United States folks are served by an individual septic system. About a third of all new construction in the entire country, people are going to be on a septic system. About 40% of all the Tennessee residents are on a septic system. And again, I mentioned about 50% in Williamson County. Yes, ma'am. With
1/3 of the whole U.S., is there a benefit? You know, what's the pro? Is there a pro or a con with so many people being on septic?
There's pros and cons on a lot of it. It's not designed that way. It's just that sewer capacities can only go so far. Right. There's just a lot of places where sewer's not available. That really has more to do with the reasons why. But there are benefits to being on septic. It's a very natural green process. It's low cost, can be very low cost. You don't have monthly sewer bills, but it also can, there's cons as well. They're limited in what they can do. They're limited on the types of wastewater they can treat. They're limited on how long they'll be viable. And we'll talk about it here in a little bit. Septic systems are designed to fail ultimately. And they can restrict your property on what you can and can't do. We'll talk about that too, on like bedrooms and things like that. So they're pros and cons. Just depends on your perspective. But you know, back to some of these other statistics. I mean, y'all know Williamson County and how fast it's growing. It's one of the fastest growing counties in the state, and one of the fastest growing counties in the nation. Affluent residents. I don't have to tell y'all that. The last time I saw, we were in the top 10 most affluent counties in the entire nation. And so what does that mean? It means really big houses. And we're building really big houses on a septic system. Okay, so those houses are very expensive. People have money, and when they don't work, it's a big deal. So we place a premium importance on making sure that works. And so that's reflective in our department. And I know that sometimes we get a bad rap on being strict and stringent and all that, but that's why. Because of what we're doing and the houses we're doing it, and we don't want to have a failure. Because then we're really going to be in trouble.
Have you, I guess, what would you see in, I guess, reduction of failures over the years? I mean, are you seeing just less and less of?
I will tell you this, that we probably have the least amount of failures. We have the lowest failure rate of any county in the state of Tennessee.
Okay.
Yeah. It's been that way for a long time. And that's reflective of how we do things.
Sure.
And our regulations. So, you know, everyone wants that country living close to the city. And so that kind of feeds all this stuff. So let's shift gears just a little bit. And let's talk about what a septic system is, just so you have a little bit of concept of what a system is and how it works. So what are they? How do they work? What types of systems are there? Because there's many different kinds of systems out there. So just kind of a big conceptual layout of what a septic system is. So you have all your wastewater leaving the structure. Not necessarily going to be a house. Most of what you're going to deal with is a residential structure. So all the piping network collects all the wastewater from the house. Okay, and it's all directed into a tank. Okay, and that's your septic tank. Okay, and then from there, it's going to trickle out into the field lines. Okay, a lot of things happen in this system. It's not just flush it and forget about it. There's a lot of science in what happens. It actually treats that wastewater. Okay, and we're going to get treatment before it goes into the soil. So breaking those components down a little bit, let's talk about the tanks. There's a variety of different kinds of tanks in a system depending on what the system serves. Okay, there's septic tanks. They're all going to have a septic tank. Some of them are going to have a pump tank. If it's on a commercial facility and they do any kind of food preparation, they may have a grease trap. And then if it's a pump tank, they're going to have pumps and electrical controls that control the pumps. And then you're going to have the second component is your absorption field. So that's what's out in the ground. Okay, and that's a piping network that's buried into the ground. You hear the term field lines a lot of times. Okay, and that's your field lines. You should have lateral lines. And then also we have drainage around the system. We have curtain drains around a lot of these systems. So think about a French drain around a foundation of a house. So we call them curtain drains. And we're kind of protecting that system and rerouting groundwater away from our field lines. So let's look at these a little bit closer. So if you look at that septic tank, 99% of all the tanks that you're going to see in Williamson County are going to be concrete tanks. We very rarely do any kind of plastic or fiberglass tanks in this county. So they're concrete tanks. They're watertight and structurally sound, so there's regulations they have to meet. Okay, and this is where we get primary treatment of the wastewater. Okay, it actually treats the wastewater. It's a dual compartment tank, so you have two sections, and it's divided up into 2/3 and 1/3. That's how the tanks are designed. And you get, like I said, you get treatment. You get gravity separation, so you have the wastewater materials, your heavier materials will settle to the bottom. The lighter materials in the wastewater kind of float to the top. And you get biological treatment, it's called anaerobic digestion, okay, that treats that wastewater. And that center section between the bottom and the top, you'll end up with kind of a clearer section, okay? That's called the effluent. Kind of, it should be like a milky color. And that's the clear effluent. That's the part that will actually leave the tank and go out into the field. Okay. If you have a pump tank, again, it's going to be a concrete tank. Okay. So you'll have a septic tank and a pump tank. It'll be usually a little bit bigger than septic tank. It's a single compartment, and it does exactly what it says. It's going to house the pump and the controls. A lot of the systems I'm going to talk about are pressure dose systems, or there's some systems where we can't get gravity flow to the fuel line, and we have to pump it over there to that. So that's why we have those pumps in there. And it'll contain the pump, the floats, and the discharge assembly to make all that work. Okay? So you'll hear that term pump tanks. The second component is that absorption field. That's what's out in the ground. Okay, that network of piping. Pipe and gravel is usually what you'll have in our county. Okay, the soil is where we get a lot of treatment of that wastewater. So the whole point of having good soil, you'll hear us talk about having really good soil. Soil is full of microbiological activity. Okay, and so as that wastewater percolates through that soil, it basically provides a food source for all the microbes in the soil, and they digest that wastewater. Okay, so you get biological, chemical, and physical treatment. Think about the soil as like a big sponge. Okay, and it soaks up that wastewater, but then there's bugs and stuff inside that digest it and clean it up. So as it filters through the soil, it's filtering and treating it. By the time it gets to the groundwater, it's cleaned up. That's the whole goal. That's the whole point of the entire thing that we do with septic systems, is to clean up that wastewater before we get into the groundwater. Okay. So soil quality is very important. How good the soil is. Okay. You want really good soil. You have to have a certain amount of soil for it to filter through. To get that treatment, it's got to be a certain quality. You hear people talk about sand, silt, and clays and things like that. So think about clay. Clay's bad. They build ponds out of clay. It holds water. Okay. So you'll hear us talk about restrictive layers. Don't have enough depth to clay. Don't have enough depth to rock. Okay. That's that quality that we don't have enough good soil. So it's really small. So we don't get the treatment. So we can't approve that soil. So you have to have good soil. I'm gonna just say you have to have good soil, but we also have to have enough soil. So quantity, how much do we have? Is it big enough to treat the amount of wastewater that we got to get rid of in that house? Yes, sir.
Williamson County, is clay really prevalent? Williamson County, do you have areas that are a lot of clay and no clay over
Yes.
here? Or? Okay.
Williamson County, and I'm not a soil scientist. I wish one of the guys was here. They could really get into the geology. We're in the unique position that we run the gamut. We're on the edge of the Highland Rim and all that. The east part of the county towards Rutherford County is very rocky. So it's very shallow soils, a lot of rock. But as you move towards the west part of the county, the soils get better. So there's transitional areas. So yes, we run the gamut. And depending on where you're at in the county, a lot of our soil scientists, they can almost predict in general what the soil is going to be like before they ever go to that part of the county. Now, there's pockets of good soil and better soil and bad all over the place. But in general, you can see trends across the county. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Is the soil usually the number one reason why land doesn't perk?
That's exactly it. Yep. Is the soil quality. That's right. Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about soil in a minute and talk about the term perk. And that's what everyone likes to use. I hate that term because we don't do perk tests very much anymore. No, you're fine. But that's what people realize or recognize, and that's what they know. But that's what that means. It doesn't perk or it does perk.
What's the new term? Anti-perk term.
We get very technical. We talk about absorption rates and things like that. So what kind of systems do we have? Now, I'll tell you this, and I'm not going to apologize for our regulations because our regulations are very strict, they're very stringent, but I'll make no apologies for them because of some of the things I told you before about what our goal is, and we take our charge very serious in the houses that we're building, the amount of wastewater, and our low failure rates. Part of that being restrictive is we're very particular about which systems we allow to be installed in Williamson County. You can go to other places in the state, other counties next door, and they put all other kind of systems in that we don't put in Williamson County. Okay, we're very particular. We're very strict and stringent about which ones we do. The ones that we do put in, we do to perfection. We have them figured out. We know how they'll work, and we know how to put them in and make them work. So there's 3 basic systems that we allow right now in Williamson County. And it's the standard conventional system. So that's typically your gravity flow system. It's got 1 tank. The gravity flows out in the field line, and it's pipe and gravel, okay? Bigger trenches, okay? And just gravity flows out there. Pretty basic system, been around for 100 years, okay? We do them a little bit different than some places in the state, but they work really well. You'll hear an alternative system, low pressure pipe, LPP, modified LPP, okay? Low pressure pipe is a engineered system. It's a pressure system. And I'll show you a little bit more here. It pressurizes the whole field. So it's always going to have a pump, always has to be designed by an engineer. Third one we do is a Wisconsin mound, an elevated sand mound. So it's built above ground kind of. I've been here 23 years, I've built 2. And we have not permitted a new one 15, 18 years. They're very expensive, and no one wants this big, huge mound in their yard. There's other alternatives that we can look at now. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. We also do some experimental systems, okay? On repair cases only. So when we have a failing system and we're trying to fix that system and we can't fix it in a standard manner, okay? They require Board of Health approvals, lots of engineering work, lots of site work. So it's not a standard type system. There's deed restrictions placed on them. There's legal agreements. There's all kinds of different requirements. There's stuff recorded against the deed. So, you know, they're kind of a special deal. We do a couple a year trying to fix problems, real bad problems. So kind of looking at a diagram a little bit, here's your conventional system, a gravity flow system. You can see the tank that I mentioned, and you can see how it just goes from the tank to one field line, and it just gravity flows, and it fills the gravel up, and the gravel is just storage. Okay, it just stores the wastewater so that it can absorb into the soil. Okay, and so over the years, it kind of sludgy biomatter build up and clog the gravel up, and it just kind of works its way down the pipe and down the gravel, and then it'll go over to the next trench. And years go by, and it'll go to the next one. So it just kind of goes from one to the other. But it may take, you know, years and years and years to use up that first trench before it ever even gets to the second one. Okay, so we build these systems to last like 50 years. That's the goal. Okay, they need to last a long time. Okay, so it's a very, very basic system. An LPP system, like I mentioned before, is a pressurized system. They're much smaller trenches. They're only 6 inches wide, whereas the others are 3 foot wide. These are 6 inches wide. These have small diameter PVC pipe, usually about 1 inch in diameter. Okay, it's got a pump to it. It's got a manifold. So when the pump kicks on, it sends effluent to all the pipes at one time. And it pressurizes them, sends a big dose of effluent, fills the ground up, and then it cuts off. And then the effluent percolates through the soil, kind of dries out a little bit, and then the pump kick on again. So it's kind of pump will kick on 2, 3, 4 times a day. So you have a lot of water to it, and then it dries up and give another slug of water. And that gives it some aerobic activity. So you get some better treatment of the wastewater. So you're alternating between, you know, standing in water for anaerobic and then let it dry up a little bit and get some air to it, some oxygen to it to help break down. So it's a little bit better system. About 50% of all the systems we do are LPPs in Williamson County.
That's what I was gonna say. So I just feel like I've seen more a trend going towards I'm seeing less. I didn't know if that was just like coincidence.
So there's several reasons for that. We talked about soil quality and quantity. LPPs don't take as big an area, so it takes a smaller area, so a smaller footprint, so people can free up more of their property to do things with. Also, lot sizes changes the size of the lot. Okay, the soil dictates it too. LPPs can go in a little bit more marginal soil because we're doing that dosing kind of thing. So as the years have gone on, we used up more and more of the better soil. So now we're more in the marginal soil, so you're seeing a lot more LPPs. A lot of it has to do with size, how big an area we have. That's probably one of the big things that you'll see, lots of LPPs.
Is the LPP more expensive than a conventional?
It is, yes it is. I'm gonna throw out a few little figures, and some of these are probably dated and costs are just skyrocketing here lately. But say a conventional system, a normal conventional system for a 4-bedroom, maybe $25,000. An LPP may be $30,000, $35,000. okay? So usually, used to be the rule of thumb was $10,000 or $12,000 more, okay? We do an alternative to this called a modified low pressure, where we bring in a little bit of soil. So we don't have quite enough depth, we'll bring in about 6 inches, okay? So you'll hear MLPP, okay? So we're bringing in soil. That's going to add another 10 grand probably to the system, just rough. Soil is very expensive, okay, to bring in, okay? So here's your kind of visual of a mound. Like I said, it's kind of a big, think of a big hump in the yard, big mound, it is what it is. It's a sand mound. So we bring in sand. It's got to be a certain quality of sand, and you build this big mound, and then you build your trenches in that, and then basically it kind of has like an LPP inside, okay? And what the deal is with that is we don't have very much soil at all, so we use the sand as the filtration to help clean that wastewater up before it does hit the natural soil. Again, the sand is the big deal. It's got to be imported in from West Tennessee on barges and trucks, and it's very expensive. It's got to be a certain quality. There's some other options out there that we look at anymore.
Sorry, not to go back to the
Sure.
alternative, but just what you were saying, how we're seeing more and more of the alternative systems. And I know you said, I heard you say better, it's a better system. Is there any more benefits beyond just the size and the fact that it can go in more marginal soil? I mean, like system to system, kind of apples to apples, is there any other reason why the county thinks it might be a better system?
We design them so that they should all last the same amount of time.
Okay.
Now, my personal opinion, and I've got some guys on my staff that love the conventionals, and I like the LPPs.
Yeah.
I got the engineering background. I like,
Sure.
you know, but I prefer the LPP. If I was going to put one on my house, that's what I would prefer. And the reason I do is because of the dosing and resting I talked about. So you get this slug of water, and it gives time to get some aerobic activity. You actually get better treatment of the wastewater through the soil, and theoretically, the system should last longer because of that. Now, there's cons associated with them too. Now you have 2 tanks, you have pumps, you have controls. Those things have to be replaced over time. So, you know, there's pros and cons. But I like the LPP really good. And we do more LPPs in this county than the entire state of Tennessee does combined. We do a lot of them. We were the first people to bring LPPs. They originated in North Carolina. Williamson County was the first one to bring them to Tennessee, and we kind of perfected them. We changed how they were originally designed in North Carolina. The way we do them now, just about everyone does them now. But we've been doing them a long time, and they work really good. So, some experimental systems. This is where we get creative. There's lots of technologies out there. There's lots of companies that make different technologies, different pieces of equipment to treat wastewater. Treating wastewater is nothing new. Been going on for 100 years. So there's companies out there that make products to treat wastewater, okay? And so we look at some of these, they get them down onto a small scale to do for an individual house, okay? So we can treat the wastewater, clean it up before we put it in the soil, okay? And in Tennessee, the state uses these types of systems as a normal system, okay, as an approved system. Right now, we do not in Williamson County. We're looking at that. We're actually trying to write regulations on that for a couple of years now. So we're going to be doing that. Right now, we only do it on an experimental basis, okay, to fix a failing system. And some of them that we use, that we have used that we really think have a lot of promise are some media systems. And so I got a picture up here. One of them that we use a lot uses peat. And think of peat moss, okay? But this is peat that comes from Ireland, okay? And it fits in these big bins, so maybe probably a little bit longer than this table, about 3 times as wide. And the wastewater filters through that media, and it provides a place for that biological activity to take place, and it cleans up that wastewater, okay? And it cleans it up to secondary quality levels, okay? Not quite drinking water standards, but cleans it up really, really good, okay? And then it goes into the soil, and now we're not relying on the soil to treat the wastewater. We're just relying on it to absorb clean water. So it's a big difference. So we look at peat systems. There's another company out there that instead of peat, they use coconut husk. It's called Core. We've done that several times. The first one that was ever done in Tennessee and Williamson County went on Arrington Vineyards. Now that system's not there anymore. They've had to, they outgrew that and they're doing something completely different, but that was the first one we ever did. But they also do foam. So think about couch cushion foam, okay? They cut up in cubes, okay, and fill it up with that. And again, it's just a place for those microbiological activities to take place, okay? They can be, there's all kinds out there from shredded rubber tires to acrylic glass. There's all kinds of different technologies. There are other technologies that are a mini wastewater treatment plant, okay? And have all these different aeration units and the wastewater bubbles and does all this stuff and cleans it up. So there's all kinds of technologies out there, and we're gonna get there. We're just not there yet. But that's something we've done several on these experimental systems. The peat systems, first ones ever went in Tennessee, we put in here. Some of these really advanced systems with the mini treatment plants, we've just recently done two. We're fixing to do a couple more. Y'all are familiar with puckets out in liquor sport?
Yeah.
So we had to fix puckets failing the system, and it's got one of these very fancy, very, very expensive systems that treats the wastewater because they don't have any good soil. Then you look at, there's a new twice dailies out in Triune by 840.
Yeah.
Okay, they got a coffee shop in there. So their wastewater is very, very different. Okay, and so we got to treat it and clean it up. And it's got one of these high-filling systems on it. Very expensive though.
Incredibly clean bathroom though, not twice daily.
It's what now?
Incredibly clean bathroom, not twice daily.
They are, and I'll talk a little bit about that.
Last week, I'm like, it's twice daily.
We had lots of restrictions on what they could and couldn't do in their bathrooms.
Those cleaners and stuff, yeah.
Cleaners are a big deal. No
Yeah.
paper towels. They had to be air hand dryers. But yeah, all that stuff. We now have regulations that regulate what they do inside their building because of that.
Question in the chat. Sorry, Jessica. What land is there that cannot be approved for any septic system?
So anything that, so did y'all hear the question? Okay, what land cannot be approved for system? So you're looking at things that have very rocky soil or very shallow to clay. Those are the two things. So they don't have enough depth of soil. That's the biggest thing that we see. Okay. I think someone else had a question. Yes, ma'am.
If the rock is removed, bulldozer, can it?
No, a couple of things, and people ask that all the time, can we bring in soil? Now, the regulations require native natural soil, and it goes beyond just regulation, it's state law. There's a whole section of the state statute that spells out the quality and quantities of soil, and so it's got to be native natural soil, it's got to be what the good Lord put there billions of years ago.
Experience with Rid-X and those type deals, what do y'all, any dip?
Yeah, I mean, I discourage it. There's no good scientific evidence that it is beneficial. I mean, I think it does what they say it does, but it also can do too much and how it breaks down stuff. If you go back to the slide of the tank and how it divides up into the solids and the stuff that float, there's enough biology. Every time you flush your tank, your toilet, there's enough microbes in there to do what it's supposed to do. So we discourage it. We don't recommend it.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Getting back to the quality of the soil, if there is a low depth soil, would the low pressure system work if you did bring in soil? I think you said that.
To an extent,
To an
yeah.
extent.
The regulations allow us to bring 6 to 8 inches of soil, and that's all. So we can't bring in 2 feet of soil. We can bring in a little bit, okay? And so the reason we can't bring in a lot of soil and build systems on that soil, because it gets down to soil science and the science of soil and soil physics, how water moves through soil. When it's brought in, it's disturbed, okay? So it's taken out of its natural state. The structure and the texture of the soil has been all muddled up. And now you can't scientifically predict how the water moves through it, because you could have channels where it just rushes through one area and it doesn't do its native natural thing. So there's no predictability of the wastewater, no predictability of how it moves and how we're treated. So that's why the laws don't allow bringing that fill material in. But it does give us the ability to bring just a little bit in, but not a lot.
Who would you find to determine if the system like that would work?
Yes, yeah, soil scientists, there's, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. There are licensed soil scientists that go out and evaluate that soil, yes. And they're the ones that tell us that depth and the quantities and stuff. We'll talk about that here in more detail here in a minute. So now we kind of got a little basic about what systems in. Let's go back to our regulatory process, some of the things that start getting into what y'all are interested in. So a little bit of background. So I mentioned earlier state law. That's where it all starts. There are state statutes that govern septic systems, okay? From there, it goes to state regulations. And I mentioned before, TDEC.
If Hazel wants to come down on the 23rd for that middle school mixer at church.
Sorry about
Just gotta
that.
love technology.
Yay.
I think we all learned to deal with all that last year. So it goes from state law, state regulations. From state regulations, then, like I was telling you before, goes down to local regulations. And that's where we are. We've got our own set of regulations. And our current regulations were originally adopted in 2000. And I still call them new regs. They're 21 years old and they're the new regs still. But that was a big thing when we did that in 2000, a big shift and a big change for us. But that's where our current regulations are, so our current regs. So again, I talked about what our regulatory philosophy is in our department. And it's really one of quality control. And it's throughout that entire process. So from that raw piece of land to get it approved, to building a house, to 15 years later, they want a pool, to the end of their life, they're fixing to hook the sewer. We're going to be involved. And I term our stuff as quality control, okay? We have licensed soil scientists, we have PE and engineers, we have all these technical people in our department. We don't look at the soil, approve, to investigate it. We don't design the systems. We oversee the private sector that does that, okay? We're the quality controller, that cradle to grave. The other thing I'll tell you too is no longer is it just covering it up and forget about it, okay? You've got to think about these systems. It's like, I use the analogy, it's like buying a new car. You wouldn't buy a new car and never change the oil in it. You're going to do the maintenance to it to make sure it lasts its good lifetime. And there's maintenance things that you need to do even on the most basic system, keeping your tanks pumped, things like that. If you had a question.
On a parcel that's on a septic tank, no sewer, and they've got a pool, if they drain the pool for repair or whatever, do you just drain it out in the yard?
On a pool like that, yeah, they'll drain it out on the ground.
And away from the septic?
Yeah, that's what we would want them to do. Yeah. Yeah, they wouldn't, yeah, you're talking about thousands and thousands of gallons there.
Is any part of the pool system plumbed into the septic? No.
No.
Yeah, just.
Yeah, I mean, most pools, and I'm not a pool expert, but I mean, pools will have some kind of filtration system.
Yeah.
And all that, it filters back and goes back into the pool. So, I mean, they're filtering it. But yeah, nothing goes into the system. So let's talk about our process in a little more detail. So it starts with that soil evaluation. We're going to talk about soil evaluation process. We're talking about the planning process, approving that piece of land, designing a system, permitting a system, installing and inspecting it, and then all the stuff that would happen years down the road. So that's kind of all the stuff we do. So it all starts with that soil. So we were asking about the soil scientist, okay? And you're talking about perking. So there are methods of evaluating the soil, okay? The biggest one we do now, you hear soil mapping. That's what we've gone to everything is soil mapping now. We used to do perk tests years ago, and we still have the ability to do them, but we've done one in the last couple of years. It's only after soil mapping was unsuccessful. So we don't do perk tests anymore. The other one is a soil survey. That's where our guys just go out and locate something. We've moved it completely away from that. We still have the ability to do that. We'll do it every now and again on a repair or something. But most of the time, you're going to hire a private soil consultant. Okay, they have license, just like a surveyor and an engineer has a license. Soil scientists are licensed. They're licensed by the state now. Okay, but they also have to be approved to work in Williamson County by us. So you have these qualified consultants. They go out and do the work, and they submit it to us for us to review and approve. So we got to check their work. And we'll go out in the field and check their work, and we'll check out the work and what they put on paper also. Okay, and we'll make them fix it if we don't agree with them until we agree with the results and everything's good. So that's our quality control of the soil consultants. Okay, all these folks we're talking about, I will tell you, we've got lists that are approved soil consultants, lists of other consultants on our websites and stuff that you can get. So the next step is you've got the soil, they've got a soil map, so we know the good soil, the bad soil, where it's at. Now we have to designate the septic field within that soil. Who does that? Typically a surveyor, sometimes in conjunction with an engineer, but mostly a surveyor. Excuse me. And it's not just a subdivision anymore. So you know subdivisions have a subdivision plat. It shows the lot and the configuration of the lot, where the streets are, and it'll even show where the septic fields. Well, we do a lot of what we call location maps, subsurface sewage disposal system location maps. That's not a plat of subdivision, but it's the same kind of document. We're using it now to designate those septic fields, make sure that they're sized right, they meet all the setbacks, the notes and restrictions, what it's approved for, and it's recorded a document now too. And that's what a lot of people really are using now for property development, buying and selling property. They want our approval ahead of time. Knows that they have a perk site. That's what you have when you get to that point. Okay. Again, surveyors do that, engineers, they submit that to us for us to review and approve. So we don't actually design it. We just make sure it meets all the rules and regulations. So we review it. Again, it's recorded and then it's kind of set in stone.
It seems odd a surveyor would lay out a septic field, but I guess there's regulations by the state and those surveyors know what the regs are. And so based on the soil types.
Yeah. What you just hit on is it can be a problem.
The source, yeah.
It's because surveyors survey property.
Yeah.
And so they're putting septic information on a survey document. So they're the ones that do the survey document, but it's getting septic information put on that. And you're right, a lot of times they don't fully understand the septic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the reason we review and approve it. If you get someone that has worked in the county for a long time doing this stuff, they understand a lot more than if you get someone that doesn't do septic stuff. And so that's very important. We tell that to everyone all the time. When you go to hire a surveyor, make sure it's someone that has worked, does septic work, familiar with our rules and regulations, because it can be challenging. They don't know. And that's why we review it. So we'll have a lot of back and forth, getting them to fix it and put it, get it right. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
What if you have a developer that part of the area would be good for septic tanks, but then you run into a problem that part of the area might not be? How does that work? I mean,
so that's where the surveyor and engineers get creative in how they configure that development. So you don't want to put your roads in your good soil. You don't want to put your house in the good soil. So now you have to get creative in how you make the roads, how you put your detention ponds, how you do your building envelopes. All that that's the art to creating subdivisions, because you've got just limited soil. And you may have little pockets of good soil at different places all over the place. And so that's the creative part. And that's where it comes from someone with a lot of experience that does that. Now, these bigger systems, we talked about these step systems, these big decentralized community systems. They're designed to take advantage of that one big area of soil, and they'll build their whole subdivision over here. And they collect all the wastewater, and it all goes over to one spot.
You guys don't regulate those, or do not?
My department does not.
Okay.
The planning department does.
Okay.
It's in their zoning ordinances, and the state regulates those, but not my department. We just deal with individual systems. And it's a whole nother animal.
Question in the chat really quick. What is the difference between soil mapping and a soil survey?
Okay, good question. A soil map, there's a lot more steps involved in a soil map. So the question was the difference between a soil map and a soil survey. A soil map is a lot more the evaluation's more intense. So a soil map requires a surveyor to put grid stakes across the property. So you would drive out and see a piece of property with all these stakes in the ground. Maybe have orange flags on them, and they're in a grid pattern. Okay, and so there's ground control associated with it. It's surveyed in. Then the soil scientist bores holes at each of those stakes. And that's how they evaluate the soil. So it's very intense. A soil survey is just general. They just kind of walk across an area, pop a few holes here and there and say, hey, this general area is pretty good.
Nice.
And so we have moved away from that because it's not as intense, and you can miss places. And it's also not tied down. It's not surveyed in. So, you know, you're relying on someone sketching something, and being able to recreate that is very difficult.
So a typical process kind of be, maybe you would soil map first. We've all seen where somebody's been out there with the backhoe and just picked around in a couple of spots. And then in that soil mapping process, they say, this area over here seems to be good, that's no good. Then you get the soil map, and that's when they come out and they do the stakes every 50 feet.
So let me expand upon that a little bit.
It's all
The first thing that you talked about is what we call preliminary soil evaluation. Okay?
People ask this all the
Yep.
time, ask us this.
Yep, a prelim,
Yeah.
a prelim of soil evaluation. So you're gonna hire that soil scientist, that private guy. He's gonna come out and kind of do that soil survey.
Yeah.
He's gonna come out and say, and he's gonna auger a few holes here and there, find where it looks promising, rule out places that look bad, and say, hey, we need to focus over here. We don't need to worry about this, because here's where your good soil is. And so that's the preliminary. That's usually fairly inexpensive. Okay, the soil scientist may charge you $400 or $500 to come and do that. Okay, and so once he says this is the area we need to focus on, he's going to say, now go get your surveyor and tell him to put the grid right here. So then that surveyor is going to come in and put the grid. So these guys work in tandem together. And he puts the grid in, then the soil scientist comes back and then bores all those holes at all those grid points, and then draws up his map. So yeah, you hear that term, and that's what we recommend people on pieces of property, go get a preliminary first, because it's less expensive, and you don't want to just go straight into a soil map. If you got all bad soil, then you spend a lot of money on something that's not any good.
What are the typical costs to get those two things done, the mapping and the survey?
So the preliminary probably is $400 to $500. Different guys charge different. The actual mapping, I don't know what the guys are charging now. They usually charge per acre or per site, and it may be a couple $1,000s. If if they're doing like a whole subdivision, they'll charge by the acre. But getting a surveyor involved too, there's surveyor fees associated with it. Probably doing the soil mapping itself. Again, I don't know for sure, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's $3,000 or $4,000 to get the soil, to get a completed soil map.
So to do the soil survey, the guy that comes out there and pokes around and does the preliminary
Mhm.
is gonna be a soil scientist.
Yes,
Because he can look and go,
That's
oh,
right.
this is so.
he's gonna feel it for texture and structure. He's gonna evaluate it. He's gonna check it out. Yes.
And then for the soil map, that's when you bring a surveyor out, so they can stake out.
They work together.
They got their things and all this, and then the soil scientist comes back, he
Mhm.
knows exactly where he is.
That's
and
right.
Start testing in
That's
different
right.
places.
That's right.
Thank
Yep.
you.
So in the preliminary, can they pretty much like, so say you have a lot, and if you hire a preliminary to come out and check, so they pretty much like the inspection, they can tell you whether it's going to or not. So you
General,
go,
yes,
no,
that's
yeah,
right.
I'm gonna buy that land, or no, I'm not. So you
But-
make your decision off the preliminary.
No, I
No,
would not,
okay,
because it is a preliminary and there's no guarantee.
gotcha.
So I would never make a decision on purchasing a piece of property on a preliminary. It's just a good tool. Hey, look, this should
Might
work.
be okay.
It's probably gonna be okay, but the devil's in the details,
Gotcha.
okay? It's because it looks good. Once he starts doing that intense evaluation, okay, it could get bigger, it could get smaller, you know, it could change configuration of the good soil and bad soil, all of it can change. But it gives you an indication, yeah, it's worth going the next step, okay, versus, hey, this is all
That's
bad.
kind of my question behind the question, so they could tell you pretty much right off, like,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah,
mm-mm,
that's right.
Not gonna work.
Not gonna work.
Move on.
that's
Okay,
right, that's
yeah,
right. And that's the value of that.
Gotcha.
Because you don't want to spend the $5,000 to do the full mapping and the survey work, and it all be bad, when someone can just come out there and look right out of the gate and say, this ain't gonna work anyway.
Happening.
Not gonna happen.
Gotcha.
That's right.
All right, I'm going back to the development
Okay.
area, okay? You got the approval that your land is good for what you want to use it for on the sewer system,
Okay,
okay? But you get out there and you move dirt around, does this change your,
it can,
okay,
Yep, because that, when I say before about the soil, native natural state, you can't disturb it. You can't mess with it. Okay, you start messing with it, because we have setbacks and stuff, that the soil's got to do its job. Okay, you start digging in it, then it says it can't do its job the way it's supposed to. Okay, and our whole system and how we design it is all based on that. So you start disturbing it, you drive over it with a piece of equipment, you run it up or whatever, you start digging in it or messing with it, all of a sudden it's not usable anymore. So you have to be very careful.
We tested then?
A lot of times, yes. Sometimes it makes it completely unusable. Okay, you have to go find another spot. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Right, we're actually in the process of building now.
Okay.
We're on 8 acres in Leapersburg.
Okay.
And we got a preliminary, and it was for 4 to 5 bedrooms.
Okay.
And now they've done the survey, what did it say? Yeah, so we're at the stage now where we want to get a house, but we don't know now. I mean, how do you know for sure? I mean, I guess you don't know for
This
sure.
process right here that we're talking about, that's your approval, that will be your approval. So that preliminary is just preliminary. If you do the soil map, okay, and the only thing the soil map does is it designates the good soil from the bad soil. And shows where the good soil is and the bad soil. That's all it does. The surveyor then takes that information and designates septic fields based on that information. And he designates those septic fields and sizes them based on that information. And when he sizes them, he applies all our rules and regulations. He applies all the setbacks. He applies the slopes that they determine. The quality of the soil dictates which type of system, depending on how big a house you want. All that factors in and tells us how much area you need. Now, do you have enough good soil? That's what that surveyor does in this plating process. And that's what they send to us for us to review to make sure it meets all the regulations. And it's a survey document. And we'll go back and forth with them, making corrections until it's good. And once it's ready to be approved, then I sign it. Because I'm the director of the department, I'm the only one that can sign it. And when I sign it, that's approving it, and then it's recorded. Then you have dedicated septic, and you know what it's approved for. Because it'll say on there, it's approved for 4 bedrooms, it's approved for 5 bedrooms. Not till that point will you know 100% for sure what you're gonna have.
Okay, because the county's been out twice.
Okay?
So what kind of time frame are you looking at between that time?
So,
We can build.
yep, so that's the $1 million question on everything.
Because Brian goes fishing a lot.
I
All this guy do.
went yesterday. Yeah, so timeframes, and I haven't gone through the rest of the consultants have to be involved. Time is a big thing. And that's what everyone's concerned with now. And here's how I answer that question for everybody. Everyone is covered up in work.
Yeah.
Y'all are covered up in work. These consultants I'm talking about, the soil scientists, how long did it take you to get the soil scientist out there?
It didn't take too long.
Oh, I'm surprised.
I was impressed.
Most of the time I'm hearing the soils guys, if they return your call, if they can get to
You
you,
have to be persistent.
you do.
You have to call.
You
and have
do.
to call.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It may take them a month or more to even get to your property. They'll put you on their schedule a month
I
from
think it
now.
helps being a realtor too, though.
It does, because they're gonna help their repeat customers and their builders and contractors, stuff like that. So, but all these guys have their timeframes. Those soil scientists are a month or more out, okay? I get complaints all the time. It's not just here, across the state. I serve on some state committees, and it's a problem across the state too. No one calls back. They're just covered up. So it may take them a month or more just to come out to do the preliminary. And then now you gotta get a surveyor involved. A surveyor is covered up. It may take 2 months before they can ever get to your property. Okay, and then you gotta have an engineer and they're 2 months out. We're no different. We've got hundreds and hundreds of projects in our office right now. Okay, just our plating, we're 2 to 2.5 months out in our reviews. So they finally get it to us, and it's gonna take that long before we can get to it, because we got so many ahead of it. And it's just that it's a volume problem and not enough people and enough time. So time starts stacking on itself. So, you know, and I hate, people want to nail you down on a time, and it's what you said, and it's all different. Every situation is different. But if you start off with a raw piece of property, it could very well take you 6 months to where you got something approved. But if you're in different stages, it's different, just depending on where it's at and in the state and the process. But persistence is important. The other thing is you just have to have, and we'll talk about this more down the road, a reality check, okay? And you can't live in this dream world about, you know, this is gonna happen at a certain time. You have to be realistic about it, and you have to be patient, okay? Patience is tough, because everyone's raring to go. I mean, the real estate market, the building market, everyone's going 100 miles an hour, but it just, there's not enough hours in the day, not enough people. We'll talk about some more of this stuff too. Let me kind of move on a little bit, and we'll keep getting into some of this stuff as well. So we got that areas designated. Okay, now you're wanting to actually do something about system and getting your building permit. Okay, so you gotta have site plans that show where your house is gonna be, where your driveway is gonna be. We need floor plans. Okay, tell us you're gonna build a 4-bedroom house. I gotta see it. Okay, we'll talk about bedrooms here down the road. If it's a low pressure system, now it's got to be designed by an engineer. Okay, conventional systems, the standard conventional doesn't. Okay, takes more time. Now you got to get an engineer involved, and he's got to design it, and then he's got to send it in to us, and we got to review it too. Quality control. Okay, make sure it's right. So that has to be done before you get a permit. Okay, so there's that aspect to it as well. So then you're ready for your permit. There's lots of different forms and applications. There's application forms, zoning certificate, there's affidavits that you have to fill out for us about bedrooms, oversized tubs, we'll talk about in a minute, letters of intent, what do you want them to do? We're gonna make you quarantine the area. That septic field, you've done all this work, you've designated it, and you don't want to disturb it, we're gonna make you stake it and put a fence around it, so all the contractors and the subs, no one's delivering lumber and bricks and driving over it and tearing it up, and then you got an unapproved area. Okay, so we're gonna make you stake it and fill it and fence it off. So you'll see orange mesh fence in big areas, or that's a septic field.
Just in the middle of the field.
In the middle of the field,
Yeah.
that's right. Yep. And so in all this stuff, we're gonna do our review process, okay? We're gonna go out and make sure it hadn't been disturbed. We're gonna make sure that everything's good, okay? And not only does our department review that application for that building permit, but you have those other departments I talked about as well. Planning department, the engineering department, all those folks, they have different roles that they're going to do all the review. And you got your fees, your permit fees that you have to pay. Okay. Now you put the system, ready to put the system in. Okay. Again, the big thing, certificate of occupancy. That's what everyone wants. I can move in my house. We will not issue a certificate of occupancy until the system's been installed, it's been approved, inspected and approved, and we've issued a certificate, it's called a certificate of completion. Okay, so installers, the ones that actually build the system, they have to be licensed by our office. Okay, and they have to be specific Williamson County license. They have a state license, but they also have to have a Williamson County license. Okay, they're licensed and bonded. Then when they do their installation, when they're building the system, we have our division of inspectors that we go through a multi-stage inspection process where we inspect the system throughout to ensure that it conforms to all the regulations, and it's only done under dry conditions. Can't be done when it's out wet. Okay, soil, it messes the soil up. So we have that multi-stage inspection process.
So do you bond them because, like, if they install the system and they do it wrong, and y'all gotta come back and fix it, you can call them?
If they don't do what they're supposed to do, then we have the ability to call a bond.
Okay.
In the 23 years, I've been associated with calling bonds twice, and it's not a good situation.
Yeah.
Lots of lawyers have to be involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's most of the time, you know, and everyone makes mistakes. I mean, we've got good installers, we've got bad installers, we got some we have to work with more than others. But most of the time, if there's an issue, they're going to work with us to get it fixed. You know, that they want to get paid. Bottom line, you know.
When you say bad installers, it's just guys who work quick, they're lazy, they cheat on the stone, whatever, anything.
You run the gamut. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's no different. You got 700 soil scientists. We got some that are better than others. I mean, you know, it's
Yeah.
same with realtors. I mean, it's no different than any profession. No different. I mean, it's the same.
Now you know your perspective. But you know that.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, I could say that about engineers too. I mean, I could say about surveyors. But that's our role.
Yeah.
That's why we're quality control. Because at the end of the day, it's got to be right. And so sometimes it's harder to get from A to B, depending on who we're working with. So the other thing we deal with is after the fact, after that house is there, we're going to be involved in anything they want to do to that property as long as that system's there. If they want to do an addition, remodels, replacement, renovations, we're going to talk a lot more about some of these because y'all get involved in this a lot. We get involved in commercial projects as well. Failures, if the system does fail, okay, then we have to fix it. And so we're involved in that process. We talk about recertifications, you know, going out when they get ready to sell a piece of property, let's go out there to make sure it's still working right, okay? And it's still sizing the way it's supposed to. We do water samples. We don't do hardly any anymore, but we still have the ability to do that. Private labs have taken over a lot of that role for us. So let's shift focuses again a little bit. So that's kind of a lot of background. Let's kind of focus back in on y'all's role and how this relates to what you do and the properties you deal with that are on septic, and talk about disclosure and things for you and your clients and stuff like that, and kind of focus kind of on that. So let's talk about some of that. When are septic systems required and where? So a couple of key things to keep in mind. Every structure that's served by running water has to have a septic system. Okay? If it has water service to it and it has internal plumbing, you have to have a septic system to serve it. The other big key is separate structures have to have separate systems. Each structure that's served by water has to have its own system. You can't have two structures all share one system. So if you got two houses, two systems. You got a house and a barn, the barn's got plumbing, and have a system for the barn. Okay?
Is that a Williamson County requirement or a state?
Yes, it's a Williamson County requirement. Separate structures, separate systems. Okay? The other thing, if you have a structure that has multiple kitchens, so you got the downstairs that you finished out for mother-in-law suite, and it's got a full-blown kitchen, that whole downstairs we treat like an apartment, and it's got to have its own system.
Wow.
Okay, so multiple kitchens can be a big deal. Okay, it's like a duplex. Okay? So keep that in mind when you see things like that.
Do you have to have 10 acres for that, to have the other septic?
Now you're getting into zoning questions, and I have enough trouble with all my regulations. No, not necessarily. It depends on the zoning district. The zoning dictates, you know, that kind of stuff. Different zoning districts, different things. So yeah, I'm not a good one to answer that one.
Quick question in the chat. We've actually got a few, but I'll let you keep moving. First, is the permit the only guarantee of number of bedrooms, or is the site map a good indicator? Second part to that question, how often does the number of beds change on the site? How often does number of beds on the site plan change when getting the permit?
Okay, so the first question, the permit is the official document of the approval of the system. So what it's permitted for, the number of bedrooms, is what the system actually approved for. Now we have the plat document that says what it potentially could be. Okay, and so you got the ability to do that. But when we issue the permit, the actual permit for that system, it just kind of keeps narrowing that focus down. And so that permit is the guarantee of what it was approved for when it was installed. Okay, now through the process, and we'll talk a little bit about this in a minute, so I may come back a little bit to the second one. Do bedrooms change? All the time. Because what is a bedroom? And so let's hold off that and come back, because we're going to talk about that here in just a second.
I think this will be an easy one real
Okay.
quick, and then I got a few more, but we'll let you keep moving first. Does a septic permit on a tract of land ever expire?
Good question. Yes. So a permit, the actual permit, is good for 3 years.
Nice.
Okay, so you have 3 years to construct that system. Okay, if it's not constructed, inspected, and approved, then the permit expires. You have to get a new permit. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to do all that preliminary work again, because some of that's still probably good. but the permit itself. The permit is also invalid if the property changes hands. Okay, so we can only issue the permit to the property owner, and the permit is not transferable between property owners. Okay, so if you get all yours approved, you get a permit, you haven't built your house yet, and you sell it.
Yeah.
The next person has to get a new permit. And they don't have to get all the preliminary work done. We're going to ensure that it's still valid, but the actual permit is not transferable. So a lot of times people want to buy and sell property, they want a permit, and that's really not what you need. You need the plat document to buy and sell, because the permit itself is not transferable. Okay?
And if you transfer and the new owners have to get a permit, is that reasonably quick? That's not.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. We're just gonna make sure that everything's still valid. We're gonna visit the site, make sure it hadn't been disturbed and bulldozed through. As long as everything's valid. Now, if it's really old and that soil map is really old, we may get you to get a surveyor to go back out and restate things. So that may delay things and cost a little bit more, but if it's really old, because, we just go out on a piece of ground, we gotta see what we originally approved, see if it's still valid.
So if the plat is recorded and it's got your signature on it, it shows the AV system, says 4-bedroom.
That's right.
That's what it takes if there's no house on it, there's no point, the permit doesn't transfer, that's what you.
That's right. That document has vested interest. So when you get that document, then now, and that's why we get it recorded. Now you have vested rights for the septic, as long as it doesn't change. So if the rules change, and the regulations change, and the way we do systems are different, it's still vested, you have vested rights to use those areas, as long as they haven't been disturbed.
Right.
So that's the importance of the platting and getting it recorded, because now you have vested rights.
Does Wilco, Williamson County, that's what I call it too. Does Wilco allow gray water?
Good question. No.
No.
Yeah.
That's a no.
And that's not just Williamson County, that's state.
Okay.
Yeah. And I will say this, it's funny you bring that up. I was dealing with a system that was done in the early 80s. That's a gray water system last week. They did some years ago. There's probably a couple in the county that are really old. But in Tennessee, you don't really see that. You don't see also recycling water to bring back into the house to use for flush water and things like that. The state regulations don't allow the gray water system, so we don't.
Can you expand 1 second on the gray water system?
Gray water system, there's gray water, black water. Think of black water as the toilet.
Yeah.
So it's the stuff with the human waste, okay? Gray water is gonna be your sinks, stuff out of your kitchen, laundry, things like that. That's gray water. So it doesn't have.
You don't allow a black water system and a gray water.
No, it's all commingled together.
I got you.
A gray water system, under state law, is still classified as sewage,
Yeah.
even though it doesn't contain human waste, okay? But it's still classified as sewage.
Yeah.
So even if you just have, say you got a barn, it's only got a sink in it, you still have to have a septic system for it. Even though it doesn't have, human waste, it's still, that's technically is gray water, but we don't treat it any different. It's all classified as sewage.
Kind of piggyback off that, what specifically determines if it's a separate kitchen? I'm assuming kind of like your barn situation.
It's a good question as well.
What would you need
No, that's a
to
good
know
question.
to get a septic?
We fall back on a lot of the zoning regulations on what constitutes a kitchen versus a kitchenette. And so we look at, to be not a kitchen, to be a kitchenette, can have no stove, no oven, can have no 220-volt electricity service to it, can have no gas service into the room. It can only have a small single bowl hand sink. We used to just say a single bowl sink, but what's everyone want in their kitchen now?
Disposal.
They want a big farm sink,
Can't think of things, yeah.
but the things half as big as that table. So when we say single bowl, it's a small single bowl bar sink for hand washing. So that's the things that we look for on, is it a kitchen or a kitchenette? It's a very, very good question.
I bet you'll make a lot of people mad.
You mean we're not the most popular department out there? Huh? So let's talk a little bit more about when and where systems are allowed. Again, no sewage services anywhere. So We get involved a lot of times with housing of animals, okay? So structures that contain human occupants and shelter for animals have to have separate systems. So now you've got a barn and you want an apartment above it, and you got horse stall washing facilities downstairs. Okay, you're gonna have a human wastewater system, you're gonna have an animal wastewater system. Okay? Two completely different types of wastewater we're dealing with. What's in them is different. Okay, so we don't want to commingle those and make a problem. We'll keep them separate. Okay, but now you have to have two. Same way with vet clinics, things like that. Kennels, dog kennels, grooming facilities. Those are big things we see now. Barns, barn apartments, barns with wash stalls, that's one of the biggies. The wash stall thing, what we try to tell people to get away from having to have a system is if you collect that wash water from the barn into a pipe, okay, you got a drain and you're collecting it, now you got to get rid of it, okay? And now you have to have a system. But if you take your wash stall and it's close to the door and you leave the door open and you slope the ground where it just flows out, now you don't have to have a system, okay? So that's a big distinction. But now you're getting into federal laws about point source discharge because you're collecting it into a pipe and you got a direct source coming through it, okay? So we try to encourage people with the barns to think about how you configure your wash stalls. And some people, they just, by golly, want drains, the trough drains or something. Okay, well, you have to have a system. Okay. Bedrooms. So residential structures, how many bedrooms you're approved for? We size the system. I talked about how big a system you need. It's based on how many bedrooms you have. Well, you gotta know what a bedroom is, don't you? Until a few years ago, there was nothing in any regulations anywhere that told me what a bedroom was. We wrote a regulation, a definition of what constitutes a bedroom. Years ago, we just looked at closets. Did the room contain a closet? It was a bedroom. Well, now we have bonus rooms being counted as bedrooms, and so there's got to be something better. So this, right, wrong, or indifferent, this is our definition of what a bedroom is, and it's been that way since 06, I think is what our handout says, somewhere around there. So we no longer look at closets. We look at proximity and access to a full bathroom. Full bathroom, we'll talk about what constitutes full bathroom. It becomes important now. Adequate privacy to that room. Can you close that room off for privacy? And a minimum square footage. The minimum square footage is 70 feet, 70 square feet, not very big, okay? The two big things is proximity to a full bath and privacy. Full bath means it has a shower or a tub. Half bath, sink and toilet only. Right? That access is on the same floor. Okay, you got a full bath on that same floor, or if it's split level, within 4.5. Okay, so that proximity is very important. Someone have a question?
Is that different for a basement?
Nope. We have a lot of people that have rooms in their basement that can be configured and counted as a bedroom because they got a full bath down there. So privacy becomes an issue too. Can you close that room off? I don't care if it's a French door, it's all glass. I don't care if, it doesn't matter to me what kind of door it is. Can you close it off for privacy? So if we think of things that have big cased openings that you walk through, and we look at stuff that's 5 foot or bigger, so that you just can't come and hang a door off. You just can't take the door off the hinges and say, okay, I don't have any doors. It doesn't work that way. Okay, it's got to be truly no privacy. Okay, we will look at closets, but we don't necessarily have to. Okay. The other thing I'll tell you is we don't look at emergency ingress and egress like the building codes do. They're looking at it for fire safety and things like that. We don't look at any of that. Our deal is if it looks like a bedroom, walks like a bedroom, quacks like a bedroom, I'm gonna call it a bedroom. I don't care what you call it on the floor plans. Okay. But if it looks like that's what it's going to be used for, or could be used for, that's what we're going to call it. So we get into a lot of discussion with people on configuring rooms. Well, I want an office, or I want a theater room, or I want whatever. Then you have to truly make it that way. That's a permanent way to make it. If it's a theater room, if you got theater seating that's stair stepped up, that's built into the house. So it is a true theater room. If it's an office, then make it a true office. If you got stuff built into the walls that make it an office, it'll not just be that the next person comes in and sticks a bed in there. Okay, that's what we look for, permanent type features. Okay, so, but that's a big thing that you're going to see, because the bedrooms is what the permit's based on, which is what the approval is granted for. So if you're selling a 5-bedroom house and I look at floor plans and it's got 6 bedrooms, I'm going to tell you it's not in compliance with the septic. Okay, and now you got to disclose things.
So you'll look at, like, I'm just, like, maybe like, if a theater room did have a door, but it's like we had stadium seating built, you would check off. Okay.
And we get in lots of discussions with builders and contractors and architects about reconfiguring, just like we talked about the kitchen, okay? Make it truly what you're telling me it is, but don't just label something. I don't care what it's labeled. I have given a national presentation to a national conference on what constitutes a bedroom for an hour. And I've got 2-page list of what people call rooms.
Sure.
Butterfly room. I had one lady had a monkey room in her house, and it don't matter.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But it's got to have the characteristics of it, okay? And that's what we look for, okay?
So your definition is different than, say, an appraiser's definition?
It could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what a lot of them are using the International Building Code and the building inspector. So even in our own county, the building inspector, what he considers a bedroom is different. You mentioned the one in a basement, that you don't have a window that has emergency egress. He's not going to count that as a bedroom. But you can certainly have a bed in there and have people occupying that room. That's what we're looking for wastewater. Because what bedrooms do to us is, people talk about bedrooms. I don't care how many bedrooms. I'm counting drops of water. So that's what a bedroom equates to us, is how much water and how much wastewater is going to come out of that structure. And so do I have a system that can handle that? Okay. And so the thing that we have to look at is what's the maximum occupancy of that structure. So you could have a 5-bedroom home and only 2 people living there, very minimal water use. But you could sell it, and they could come in with 6, 7 kids and fill that house up. We have to look at the maximum, no different than a church. So we deal with a church, or this room here. What's the occupancy of this room? Okay, and there's architectural standards that tells us what the occupancy rating of a room is based on the use. So this room, what we got in here, 20-something people today, but this room can hold 200. So I'm going to design a system that accommodates 200 people. Doesn't matter if you tell me I only have 20 members, okay, but you got a room that can hold 200. If you have 200 people, you're going to say, no, you can't come in? No, you're going to let them in. So in a sewer, it's different because it just all goes down a pipe and goes away to the treatment plant. But in a septic system, it stays on that property. So it's got to work. If you overload it, then it's going to fail. And now we've lost the objective of the whole reason that we exist, or my department exists. Okay? So bedrooms are important. The other one that you'll hear about is oversized tubs, again on residential. Okay? So we're talking about jacuzzi tubs, whirlpool tubs, things like that. Those hold a lot more water than a standard tub, can be used a lot more often. So now you have a lot more water that can go down a drain. And it goes in one great big slug of water that could really impact how the system functions. Okay? So we size our systems based on an oversized tub too. How big a tub is it? How many gallons does it hold? Okay? How many do you have? All those factor into our formula based on bedrooms and tubs and how we size the system. So an oversized tub is anything that's over 30 gallons. So your little old standard fiberglass tub shower combo is 30 gallons. You go buy at Home Depot. Most of your tubs probably a little bit more than that. But anything big tub in your master bedrooms, you know, and they don't even have to have the jets and the anymore. People want the big soaking tubs. Okay? People like the look, and people are like, well, I'm never going to use it. Yeah, someone can use it. Okay, so we have to factor that in. So you have to think about that, and that can become a limiting factor on your area. Okay, probably about 60% of all the permits that we do. I think that's about right, isn't it, Sean? About 60% of our permits have an oversized tub. Okay, About 60, 65 gallon average size, probably. About 60 to 65 gallons is our average size tub that you'll see. Okay? And so we factor that in. A lot of people, they just want the look. We've got one in our house. We have never used it. Been there 18, 19 years. No, longer than that. I think we wash our dog in ours every 4 years.
It's the dog's tub.
It's the dog's tub. Yeah.
So oversized is anything just blanket over 30.
Over 30 gallons is oversized.
Is a hot tub treated like a pool?
Like a big sauna, like it's out on the porch? Yes. Yeah, those are typically not plumbed in your system. Now, if you show one, we're gonna ask you, because we wanna make sure it's not, but it does not need to be plumbed in your system.
Quick question. So for current homes that have more quote bedrooms than permitted, what issues are there for future improvements that require various permits?
Okay, let's hold off
Sure.
a little bit on
Okay,
that.
no problem.
Because I'm gonna come to some remodel renovation stuff. But I will tell you this, prior to that, our current regulation on what constitutes a bedroom now, when we looked at closets, those are vested, and that's how we would look at those houses now. I mean, just because the definition changed today, we're not gonna apply this new definition to the older house. So we're gonna look at that house and say, okay, it was based on closets. That's how we're gonna count those bedrooms on an older house.
Got it.
Okay. But as far as remodels and stuff, we're gonna get to that here in just a second, and I'll probably get to that question.
Sure.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a question about the garden tub. We've got clients, their house hurt for 2 bedrooms and they had a garden tub.
Okay,
So they took the garden tub out, so it would work for 3 bedrooms,
okay.
so you can do that.
Sometimes, just depends. It's not always a guarantee, but a rule of thumb is a lot of times that tub could equate to an additional bedroom, but not always. Depends on how big the tub is, the way the formulas are sized. You know, the more bedrooms and a tub adds a lot more flow than, say, 2 bedrooms in a tub. So the way the formula works. So it's not a guarantee, but we can evaluate that and see if it will work for it. If you take it out, then you have an additional one, but not always.
When were tubs factored in? Like when was that?
Oh, my predecessor got into that issue back in the late 80s, mid 80s.
Okay.
It's when we first started seeing them.
Okay.
And it was because they were having trouble with some brand new homes that were failing. We couldn't figure out why. And they started looking at what was going on, and we were seeing, you know, that in these particular instances, they were using the tub a lot.
Okay.
They were bathing their kids in the tub every day.
Yeah,
And,
the tubbers.
yeah. And so, yeah. So it's been around. It's not something new. So let's talk about, again, why our bedrooms and tubs matter. That's how we size stuff. Again, I talked about the older permits based on the, let's back up. So I didn't really talk about that. Some of our really old permits won't even list number of bedrooms. You know, I'm talking about permits from the 60s, some from the 50s, maybe some from the 70s. They won't even list how many bedrooms is 3-4. Won't list tubs. Then we start having to kind of back calculate the sizing of the system to see how they did it. So some of those are a little bit odd. Let's talk about some other things that are important to y'all, that y'all see. Encroachments onto the system, setbacks, okay? So there are minimum distance that you have to keep away from the septic system. So everything from driveways to sidewalks to utility lines, water lines, whatever. You have to stay a certain distance away from your septic system and the components, okay? And we got a whole list, I'll show you in just a second, a whole list of different setbacks, okay? So those encroachments become very important. And the current setbacks are different than the old ones. There's just, to throw that up, there's a whole list of the different setbacks that we have. So there's a lot, is my point, okay? So let's talk about compliance versus non-compliance and conforming systems. This becomes very important to what y'all do, especially with selling property, okay? A conforming system is any system that was permitted under our current regulations. And our current regulations were in 2000, okay? So any system permitted after October 1st of 2000 is a conforming system, okay? So it meets those regulations, okay? Any system, if it was only permitted 1 day prior to this, it is a non-conforming system because it was permitted under the old regulations, Okay, now it may be legally non-conforming, meaning it met the regulations at the time, so it's legal, but it's still non-conforming. Okay, so the distinction of conforming and non-conforming is very important. Okay, because very important on what you can and can't do with the property down the road. Okay, so a conforming system, if you have encroachments onto that conforming system, so they built a pool that's too close to their septic system, okay, or some other setback, they built a driveway too close, or they got a deck over something, okay, before you can do anything to that property, you've got to get that system back into conformance. Okay, we won't approve anything else until that system is brought back into conformance. On a legally non-conforming system, there are times when we will allow those encroachments to remain. Okay, you violated the setbacks, but it can stay, depending on what you want to do. Okay, if it's something minor, not going to hurt anything, we'll let that encroachment stay. Okay, we'll give you approval to do something else. But if you do something major to the property, then we're going to say, before we can approve that, now you've got to bring it into compliance. Okay, so let's expand on that a little bit. And I call those things triggers. And this is where we see a lot of things with remodels and renovations on these older systems, and what people can and can't do. So I call these triggers. If one of these triggers happens, then you have to bring the system into compliance before we can approve anything else. If you don't want to do anything, then they can just stay. We're not the sewage police. We're not out there chasing people down. Hey, your pool's too close, fix it. But we're not going to approve something else until you fix it. Okay, and so there's certain things, and these are the triggers that I call it in the regulations. One, if the system is failing, okay, then you got to fix it. You got to bring it into compliance with current codes. If there's a safety issue, say you got a 3-story deck and the post is sitting on top of the tank. Well, the tank wasn't meant to support a 3-story deck, so you got a safety issue you got to fix. Okay, if you want to add additional heated and cooled space to your house, okay, if that's what you're proposing to do, then we're going to say, okay, your system has to be compliant with current codes. Okay, even if it's just a bump out, a little sunroom area off the kitchen. Okay, doesn't matter. If it's additional heated and cooled space, it's just black and white. Okay, if you increase loading to the system, so you add bedrooms, okay, or it's a church and they want to add seats to the sanctuary, you're adding more people. Okay, now you have to bring it into compliance. If you add additional plumbing fixtures, say I want to put a bathroom in the basement, okay, now your system has to be brought into current codes. Okay, violation of the number of bedrooms. So if we go out there and it was permitted for 3 and you got 5, before we can approve anything else to do on the property, you got to fix that compliance issue. Same way with that number of kitchens. Okay, so those are those triggers we talked about that we look for, and those become very important in remodels and renovations.
Your thought on placing weight load on top of the tanks? Because I get into it with these skid steer guys, and they're like, no, my tracks spread the load. And I tell people, tell them to stay off those tanks.
Not designed to do that. They are designed to hold about 6 inches of soil cover, and that's all.
Okay.
Now, they can make traffic rated tanks that are made to be put under structures or under pavement, but they're engineered, they're thick, they got a lot more structural stuff to them. But yeah, the structural integrity, they're not meant to hold weight and loads like that. Now, if they drive over it, is it automatically going to collapse? I don't know. Yeah. But it's not designed to do that. Yeah.
And doesn't that cause field lines too?
It does. You don't want to have anything on your field lines. You want your field lines to grow grass. Don't go plant trees. Don't make a garden out of it. Don't do anything. Let it grow grass. Yeah, don't park over it. Treat it like gold.
When you're talking about additional plumbing fixtures, when you're trying to talk to clients and stuff about, a lot of people are confused of like, why is it bedrooms? Why is it not bathrooms? Like, that doesn't make sense. You know, why is it? I was trying to explain to them, and correct me if I'm wrong, because, you know, you guys are figuring, well, you can have 11 bathrooms and 4 bedrooms, but only 4 bedrooms worth of people can use those? Or, I mean, do you guys ever look like, hey, there's too many bathrooms or too many plumbing fixtures, or?
We don't 100%.
Okay.
And it's a carryover from how the state regulations are.
Okay.
In Tennessee, it's sized on bedrooms. There are some states that the system is sized on plumbing fixtures,
Okay.
and they have all kinds of formulas on fixture counts and how much water each one uses, and it gets really complicated.
Yeah.
We've just gone from what the state did, which was some old EPA things that says that typically a bedroom use 150 gallons per day per bedroom. Okay, so the assumption is there's 2 people per bedroom. So the assumption is that a person will use 75 gallons a day in everything they do. Now, that's something that was come about from 50 years ago. There's a lot of research out there now that says those numbers are different today in today's lifestyles and how people live today and how they use their homes. So there's a lot of probably data out there that that's actually less than that. But the other thing too is we got to try to make these systems last for 50 years or more. We were under the assumption there never will be sewer. So there's safety factors built into all that. So the systems are oversized. You never want to use up to about 75% of what the maximum design capacity is. So that's the most you want. When you start doing that, then you start stressing the system. So those are buffers built in. So, but yeah, we just go by bedrooms. Mhm.
So, just so that I understand this, you use the term number of bedrooms, and you're basing it on the capacity of each bedroom of people that would use the water system. Am I right or wrong, or am I thinking wrong?
In general, that's the assumptions that are made.
Okay,
We size the system on bedrooms.
okay.
Like I was saying just a second ago, when I think bedroom, I'm thinking drops of water. When I think seats in here, a number of people, I don't care how many people you have in a room, because I think about how much water that person's going to use. And it depends on the use. So we equate it to drops of water. And so the assumption is that you can use that you'll use 150 gallons of water per day per bedroom is how we size the system. So really we turn the bedroom number into a gallons per day number. And then that's how we determine how much wastewater we have to deal with to size our system. So it's a relationship, basically, is what we're looking at. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Question, what
Right.
are some examples of what are examples of bringing into compliance?
It can be a multitude of different things. So that's a good question. Every situation is different. I mean, it could be the compliance is you just have an encroachment, say the driveway's too close, you can move the driveway over, and now it's in compliance. It could be that it's permitted for 4 bedrooms and you've got 5. Well, maybe you can remodel the inside of the house and take one of those bedrooms and turn it into, now it's not a bedroom, and now it's in compliance. It could be that it's a major deal. It could be that there's something that's not that simple, that you have to install a new system. Say you have that 4 bedrooms, it's permitted for 4 and you've got 6, and you want to do something else and you don't want to remodel. Okay, well now you got to bring the system up in compliance. It could be as simple as now, today's rules and regulations, you have to have a primary area and a secondary area. Okay, and that's state law as well from back in the early 70s. And let's say that you've got an existing system and it's functioning fine, but you don't have a secondary area. Maybe all you have to do is find a secondary area. But it could be something that's very major and you have to completely abandon that system and put in a whole new one. Say we have no records of the system at all. Say it is done, in the 50s or 60s, and say it only was a small tank and 50 foot of line. So it meets no codes whatsoever. And you want to do a big addition onto the house. Well, you got to abandon that system. You have to now put in a new system and have a new secondary. So it can run the gamut from one extreme to another.
Just weight question. Has there ever been an instance where using a larger tractor to mow versus a traditional mower has caused problems because of the weight difference?
It could happen.
Okay.
I don't know, can't think of a specific instance on the top of my head, but yeah, it can happen. We think about that like out in a pasture or a farm or something. and just to be conscious of where it's at. Don't get on the field when it's really wet, okay? Mow it when it's drier. We've had instances where we had a commercial job on a market one time that they had professional lawn guys, commercial lawn guys come out to do the lawn, and they had the bigger lawn mowers, and they'd get on there and they'd spin around in the thing, and they'd cut it when it was wet, and they would rut it up, versus we made them put a fence in with a really small gate, so they could only get a push mower in there. So that made a difference. So it's, a lot of it's common sense on what you do on the ground, and so that you don't disturb it. Because the systems in the ground are just 6 to 12 inches deep. So, I mean, a dollar bill is 6 inches. That's how deep it is. So there's not much soil before you get to your system. So it doesn't take much disturbance. And then all of a sudden, now effluent has a place where it can come up. Okay, that's what causes the failure. Okay. So you just use some common sense, treat it, protect it. So continuing on this remodel, rebuild theme that we're talking about, we talked about those triggers. We get into how elaborate the remodels and renovations are. Is it a simple remodel or is it something major? And so we break those down into cosmetic versus structural. Okay, cosmetic renovations are very minor. You're just wanting to repaint. You want to put new carpet in, new tile, put new cabinets in, new countertops, things like that. Very minor. And I don't even like to use the word flooring anymore because I've had people take that to the extreme. They rip up the floor joists and part of the foundation. Well, we're talking about carpet and stuff. Those are simple things. Those are cosmetic renovations. Okay, if you have one of these non-compliant situations, you can do some cosmetic stuff to your house without bringing it into compliance. That's fine. We don't have a problem with that. But when you go too far and you start doing structural remodels, then you do have to bring it into compliance. Okay, and so what are structural remodels? You start gutting things down to the studs in the walls. Okay, you start moving load-bearing walls. And say, well, it's an old 70s ranch style house, and I want to take out the wall from the kitchen and living room and open it up, because everyone likes the open floor plan. And now you have to have a beam that crosses that. Now you're doing structural remodels to the house. You're taking out load-bearing walls, and you're putting up support beams and things like that. Okay? You start replacing the electrical wiring all throughout the house and bringing that up to code, and it's got the old lead pipe and you want to put in new piping. Okay, we're starting to do major renovations. Basically, you're taking an old house, and when you're done, it's a new house. That's what's happening. So the rules and regulations in our Board of Health says, you do that, you're bringing everything else up to snuff, you got to bring your septic system up to snuff too. So now you got to bring your system into compliance. Okay.
Do you guys have like an anonymous tip line where you can call? Never give this guy your address.
I will tell you, I'm not out there searching these, but what happens is people get in trouble. Someone turns them in, or someone else in the county, there is a department that does enforce the codes.
Yeah.
They find remodels. I'm not out driving around. I don't have time.
I said this earlier, but if somebody's doing whatever plumbing, moving a bath around or whatever,
Okay.
Those plumbing inspectors may trigger and go, hey, Brian.
Depends on what you're doing.
Okay.
So I'll talk about new plumbing fixtures, adding plumbing fixtures. Adding is different than moving, relocating plumbing fixtures.
Yeah. Okay.
So you got a master bedroom and the bath's here, you want to update it, and we're going to reconfigure and shift it over to here.
Yeah.
You're not adding plumbing, you're just moving it around. That's different. Okay? But really what we're getting at is when you start gutting a house, and my wife watches HGTV, bless her heart, and I hate HGTV because the whole world wants to fix it up. Oh my gosh, this is my worst nightmare. Because people want to do all this stuff, they see it on TV, and they don't tell you the real story behind the scenes. But the whole deal, that was the Board of Health, and I'm going to show you some pictures here in a second. The Board of Health concern was, you got a brand new house, and most of the time it's people investing, and they're going to sell it to someone who doesn't know anything, and they're on a substandard system with a new house, and they think everything's good to go. They move in, they've just spent $1 gajillion on a home. 6 weeks later, their system's failing, it's running all over the ground, and there's no way to fix it. Now whose problem is that? That's where that was born. Okay, this one.
What if you're, you have a client that wants to buy a property, say 2 or 3 acres, that has an older home on it, and they want to completely tear down the home
Right.
and rebuild?
Mhm.
And say it was originally permitted for 3 bedrooms.
Okay. So
They just start all over like it's
typically,
raw land?
that's right, that's right. So typically an older system, the system that's going to be associated with a house like that is an older system that doesn't meet any kind of current standards. Typically, you're going to have to start over. The other thing is systems are designed not to last forever. Okay, they're designed to fail. So the older the system, you know, think of the picture of the system with all the trenches. Okay, after 30 or 40 years, 3/4 of that system is not good anymore. Okay, so 3/4 of it's used up. So it's on its last leg anyway. Whether it might not be failing, but it's 3/4 of its useful life is gone. So yeah, you're going to have to bring it up to compliance.
So they have to have, do they have to go through the whole soil sampling?
That's right.
Everything?
That's what it starts at. That's right. So that's what you see a lot, that people come to us, they're wanting to, they bought a piece of property, there's an old house on it, they either want to tear it down or they want to redo it and build another one. Yeah, you're starting from scratch to find something that brings it up into compliance with current codes. That's right. Yes, ma'am.
So if you have a property and there's a manufactured home on it, and you're gonna build behind it, can you still live in the manufactured home, or does there have to be like a space between the new house and the manufactured home?
Okay, so you kind of bring up two different questions that I want to touch on. The first one, let's take out the manufactured thing and let's just talk about different structures. So let's say you got, let me use a barn situation. Say you got, or a trailer. Someone's got a trailer on the property and I want to build a new home. And I want to live in the trailer, I want to live in the barn while I'm building a new home, and then the trailer's going to go or the barn's going to go, whatever. There are ways to do that. Other departments in the county are involved in that, the code's compliance. They have things in the zoning ordinance about timeframes that they will allow you to do that, but then you have to vacate it, 30 days after the certificate of occupancy, this, that, and the other. So there are ways to live in an existing structure while the other one's being built, but then the other one has to go away. Okay. I want to talk about manufactured homes in a second when I get here in a second, because there's a distinction on types of structures. But to answer that one question, there is the ability to do that. It's very rare. We don't do that a lot anymore because there's a lot more involved in how we ensure that structure gets gone. That can become a nightmare because there's people getting into, well, I'll change my mind. I want to keep it. I want to do this with it. I want to do that. Well, that's not what the agreement was. So then there's enforcement issues and it becomes kind of a nightmare. So we don't do that very often in the county, but there are ways to do that. Okay? But the actual term manufactured home, I want to touch on that here in a second. Okay? So when I talked about the reason we do things, here's a prime example of one of the reasons that started this. This guy said, I'm just going to remodel my home. We had no record of a system. It was some old junk tank and about 30 foot of line in the front yard. And he makes an application to remodel his home. And that's what we find when we go out there. He's like, I'm not rebuilding it. It's still got 3 walls and still got plumbing still there. I want to use the existing system. This was a developer that was going to sell it. He had a for sale sign out there while it was going on. That's what it ended up looking like when he was done. He built a new home and he sold it. He didn't want to do anything to the septic system. That's when the Board of Health kind of started some of this and said, nah, this isn't gonna fly. Okay, so that's the difference, remodel, rebuild. Thought about, going back to, we talked about the modular home. It was on this slide. I thought I had a different slide. No. So let's talk about the different types of structures real quick. There are stick-built homes. okay, which is your normal constructed home. There are mobile homes, and then there are manufactured homes. That's why you mentioned manufactured. One of the reasons I thought of this. They're all different, okay? A mobile home is personal property. It's not real property. A mobile home is like owning a car or a boat. It's personal property, okay? A mobile home, the construction standards are different as well. A mobile home is built on a frame. It's got an axle associated with it, with tires, and you can hook it up to a truck and you can pull it down the road and you can set it in place. Those are built to different standards, okay? The codes that they're built with, our local building codes does not inspect a mobile home. They will check is the electrical hookup and the plumbing hookup. But the construction of that mobile home is done in the factory with federal inspectors to meet standards for a mobile home. There's no inspection of the structure. And it's legally classified as real property. A stick-built home is classified as personal property. A stick-built home is real property. Okay? A stick-built home is built on site, materials brought to the site and constructed there, and the local building officials inspected the building inspection. Okay? That's most of your homes. A manufactured home is different as well. A manufactured home is built in sections at a factory, and it's usually brought in on flatbed trucks, and there's a foundation built, and it's set on the foundation, okay? Parts of it are inspected in the factory, but once it gets to the site, everything else is then inspected by the local guys. Okay, it's treated more like a stick-built home, okay? That's the difference between a manufactured home and a mobile home. And the reason it's important is the way we treat mobile homes is different than stick-built homes and modular homes because of how they're legally classified. If you have a mobile home on the property, say it's been there since the 70s, and I want to replace it with a new mobile home, and I got a permit for the septic system that was done in the 70s, or we don't even have records of the septic system, and it's a mobile home. You can replace that mobile home with another mobile home, the exact same number of bedrooms, and you don't have to touch anything, do anything to your system. Because legally they're different, the structures are different. And our regulations allow swapping mobile homes like for like, okay? It's different with a stick-built home or a manufactured home. Those two is where our regulations do kick in and you have to bring things up to code. So a mobile home is, the rules are a little bit different, okay? So that's a very important distinction that we get involved with quite often. Okay. Okay. Here's the big one for y'all in your business, disclosure. Y'all all know about disclosure and what you have to do and don't have to do way better than I know what you're supposed to do. But we talked about the county we live in, the affluence, size of homes, the values of property. We live in a very litigious world. People will sue anyone over a drop of a hat, especially here with the amount of money you're talking about, okay? So this is where it becomes very important in what you do, in your job and in your roles about disclosure, okay? And you don't want to misrepresent anything about what the property was approved for or about what someone can do with that property, okay? So even though everything I've talked about today and you've learned a lot of information, don't be an expert and tell someone wrong. Refer them to us, okay, on what you can and can't do to your property. Don't tell someone, yeah, you can build that second, you can add a bedroom, you can. Let them contact us because there's too many variables in everything I just talked to you today about. So don't misrepresent. The home size versus the permit restrictions, those number of bedrooms. How many bedrooms are y'all selling it for? And how many was it permitted for? How many tubs and what size tubs in it, what's on the permit? Okay. And not that we're going to make you change anything, and not that we're going to prevent you from selling it, because I don't prevent, in my office in the county, does not prevent people from selling property. You can buy and sell anything you want all day. It doesn't matter to me. You can have 10 bedrooms and permitted for 2, and you sell it as 10. But I'm just telling you, and I don't care if you disclose it or not, but you'll get in trouble because the lawyer will get involved. Disclose, cover yourself. And then someone can make an informed decision, because they're gonna call me and I'm gonna tell them, right, wrong, or indifferent, what it's on in our records. So then they can make an informed decision. So, you know, that approval status is very important, okay? The compliance status is very important as well. We talked about, you know, how old it is and what they can and can't do and the future options. Again, do your homework. Part of the reason I brought Shauna here today, some of y'all probably already know her, call our office. We take phone calls from realtors all day long. How many a day?
At least 10.
One day there was, I walked up there, we had 50 today, okay? And we will help you as best we can, okay? But you have to do your research, do your homework, research our records, and if you won't get a recertification from us, we'll talk about that in a minute too. But do your homework, okay? Be informed. When you call us and want to know information, Sean's going to tell you to fill out a records request form, okay? And so those are on our website. Is IDT?
They're not.
Okay. They're on our website, but you can, our records are public records. Anything in our office you can look at, you can get copies of, you can view, but you got to request it. And there's an official form you have to fill out. Okay, it's on our website. You can fax it to us, you can email it to us, you can call us. Okay, be very specific about what you want. We got documents. We have some files on pieces of property that thick. We've got some that are a single file. I'm not, either me or my staff is not going to sort through 300 pieces of paper to find you what you want. Okay, if it's something really big, you need to come in, look through all that, and figure out what you want, what's of value to you. Or if you know exactly what you want, then we're going to give you exactly what you asked for. Okay, and that no more, no less. So be very specific. Help us help you. Isn't that what Jerry McGuire said? Help me. Give us the name of the property, the address, an owner. We're not mind readers. We got to search through. We have records, you know, 50 years old. We have to sort through to try to figure out. And some of our records are in good shape, some are not. So, you know, it's very important for you to help us. You got to sign and date it. Sometimes we're going to tell you there's no records exist. Everyone's like, we ain't got anything on that property. Okay.
You want current owner? Does past owners?
Sometimes that helps a lot too. Yeah, because we have a lot of our records are in property owner names, and that changes. And so sometimes it's like being a detective in our office, and they do a deed research to try to find out who used to own it and things like that. So the more information you can give us, the better off it helps us. So recertifications. You know, a lot of people that buy a piece of property, they want to make sure their system's working fine, not have any issues. They want some kind of guarantee. Okay. We offer what's called a recertification. Okay. It's very basic, it's very limited. Okay. You have to make an application for that recertification. And right now you have to come into our office to do it. It's not on our online system. That can only be done by the current owner, or the owner's agent, or their power of attorney. Okay. We will do a file search and we'll research what it was approved for and all that kind of stuff on the occupancy, and we'll disclose all that, bedrooms and all that. We will make a site visit. Okay. I'll take that down. I'll jump ahead of myself. You have to disclose the number of bedrooms and tubs. So we're going to know what you tell us it is, and then we're going to compare that to what is in our records. We'll also make a site visit. We'll look at the system. We'll see if there's any encroachments on it, and we'll note those. We'll make sure that it's not failing, it's not surfacing, and we'll kind of give you a little written document that says that. It's very basic. We'll make no guarantee of how long it'll last. We're not going to open the tank up and inspect the tank and do all that. Okay, it's kind of basic. It's the disclosure stuff. There are a lot of companies out there, a lot of septic installers, pumpers, other folks that are getting into this business, and they're going to go out and inspect your system and write you some kind of letter. The value of that is, I'm going to let you make the judgment on it. Could be. So there's no one in the state of Tennessee that's licensed to do that work. There's no standard. They're just giving you their opinion. And I will tell you right now, It is only their opinion. And these guys, some of them are more qualified than others, but I'm telling you that our staff, we would not go out and do what they're doing and write some of the letters that I see written by some of these folks. Okay? Because they don't know the status of the system. They don't know how many people have been living there. They don't even do the research on what it was approved for. There's no way to give those kind of guarantees. Okay? But people want that, and people hire them every day, and they start doing these remodels, and they get caught and say, well, I had Joe Blow out here, and he inspected my system, and he turned the hose on and put it down the tank and ran water in it for 4 hours, and he said, it's good to go. And I moved in here, and now it's not working. Or it's out of compliance, and I want to rebuild or add an addition, and you said I have to put a new one in, but he says it's good. I don't, good for him. I mean, doesn't mean anything. So all I'm saying is be very careful on who you use and how you do that and the value you place on that.
So your recertification says, well, you're going to do it now. I'll let you go ahead, but
No, it's fine.
I was gonna say, we call, request that service, y'all look through the files, come out, look at the house, make sure the bedrooms are all the same.
We're not gonna go in the house.
Okay.
We're gonna, part of the application, you have to tell us how many bedrooms in it. We're gonna tell you, okay, you're telling me it's 4, our permit says it's 3. We're gonna say, hey, our permit says it's this.
Can't you really do that on your own? I mean, I'm saying, like, couldn't people just?
People
like,
do, they can, that's.
I mean, I get beyond.
No,
that,
that's
like,
exactly, but it's an affidavit too of it. So you're signing and notarizing
Right.
the information you're giving us.
Right. I'm just
So-
saying, like, what, I see.
The point is now if you didn't tell us the right information, you're liable,
Right, sure.
okay?
But beyond that, so what do you, so to check the system, you just locate the field lines, or
Mhm.
basically that's it?
Yep.
You're not pulling tops off?
That's right.
Nothing, okay.
We're gonna know, and we're not gonna tell you if something's, that you gotta fix anything, but if we see encroachments, we're gonna say, hey, the driveway's too close, or the deck's too close, or, the day that we were out there wasn't failing. But we'll also tell you if it's vacancy,
It has to be vacant less than 2 weeks.
less than 2 weeks. If it's been vacant more than 2 weeks,
Okay.
then we're gonna give a no statement. I mean, we'll check for encroachments, but we're not gonna tell you whether it's not failing or not, because there's been no water going to it. I mean, I don't know if it's working or not. Been sitting there, no water's going to it. I'm gonna say it's been vacant. Okay, but I'm not gonna turn a hose in it and shove a hose down in it. First thing I'll tell anyone that says they did that is like, that's not how a system's made to work anyway. Why would you turn a hose on full blast and stick it into the tank and let it run for 2 hours? Well, it took all the water, okay. That's not how it's made to work anyway.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
So you're checking to see how many bedrooms there are, size of tub and so forth, and check to see if there's a failure. Is that correct?
Correct.
So.
Encroachments.
Oh, and encroachment. So everything shows that's correct.
Mhm.
Shouldn't you get someone else out there, as you mentioned earlier, to at least look at the tank, look at the field?
You
make sure
can.
The tank is functioning properly?
You can, but all I'm saying, I'm not telling you not to do that. I'm just telling you, realize what you're getting, and realize what the value of it is you're getting. Okay? Let's use an analogy again about you buying a used car. Okay? Let's say, I got a 1977 pickup truck that I've had since I was a teenager, that I've still got, and I'm gonna sell it. I'm gonna sell it to you. You may take it to a mechanic and have him look at it. You get it. 3 weeks later, the engine blows up. Whose fault is it? I mean, I've had it since 1977. You have no idea how I treated that truck. Did I change the oil? Did I do the maintenance? How many people drove it? Who drove it? Did I drive it 90 miles an hour every time and slam on the brakes? And same way with the system. Now, every person's lifestyle is different. And so you got a system that's a certain age, you don't know what's happened. And so all I'm saying is there's no guarantees. And so when people are out there saying the system's in great working order and should be fine, I'm not exactly sure how they know that. All I'm telling you is beware and understand that the information you're getting and what the value of it is. Okay? Doesn't mean that you're not going to have a problem with it, because you could. But is it good information? Yeah, sure. If it turns out good. But I also have just the opposite. I got people do it and they say, oh, your system's fixing to blow up and you got cracks in your tank and you need to replace everything. And people go, they get scared to death. They come to us, we go out there and I don't see anything wrong with your system. I mean, so maybe they're an installer and it's trying to get more business. What's their motive? I mean, because, and the reason I'm saying this is these people are not licensed. There's no license there. There's no requirements to do that. And so be careful. That's all I'm telling you. Just be careful. Think you had questions?
Can you have an additional laundry room, like in a basement, without
Good question.
another septic?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, when we see a lot of homes today with multiple laundry rooms. Typically, we don't get too concerned with that. Now, we get involved in some very elaborate floor plans now that sometimes that we see lots of different things. And we might want to adjust the size of the system a little bit and not just use a standard based on bedrooms. But if we start seeing lots of different things, then we're going to have a conversation with the owner. Because today's people's lifestyle today and the size of homes we're building is different. And people want different things, and that's fine. And we're not here to tell you that you can't do something. And I know that's what I'm coming across as. That's not what it is. We will help you do anything you want to do, but we got to do it in accordance with regulations to make it work. If we can make it work, we will do everything in our power to make it work. We're not here to tell people no. We're here to tell you yes. But to get to the yes, you got to do certain things. And so let us help you get to do those things.
On the recertification process, if you guys go out and find some failures, permit restrictions, stuff like that, do you guys, or in conjunction with the Board of Health, have any kind of authority to put, to force work to be done, or to put any kind of notice on the property?
Only on a failure.
Okay.
Yeah, encroachments and stuff we don't, but if we have sewage on the ground surface, then we're obligated by law to make it get fixed. And so we're going to issue a notice of violation to the owner and give them a time frame to fix it. And then if we don't, then it's turned over to the county attorney for enforcement. And so the enforcement goes through the Board of Health and then the courts to force compliance. Because we can't allow that public health hazard to go on. Yeah. Yeah. But that's the only thing that we're going to force. Encroachments, we're not going to make you too many bedrooms. We're not going to make you fix anything. It happens on the back end. We're not going to prove anything else on the property until it's fixed. So we know there's an issue. How can I prove you to do more when it's already out of compliance? So that's kind of how that works. And again, I want to stress, we're not the bad guy. We will help you do anything that you want to do, but there's rules we have to follow, and that's what we're going to do. So if you come to us, we're going to say, here's what you want to do. This is the route to do it. Now, you want to do something else, that's fine, but you're not going to have the county's blessing in doing it. And that's a big distinction. Having the county's approval to do it and the county's blessing to do something. That's completely different. It's like selling property. You can sell property all day that's got all these issues. I'm just telling you, cover yourself. It doesn't matter to me that it's out of compliance, but it could come back to bite you. There's just our recertification form. Just a couple of little things because we're getting close to the end. We do water samples. We just don't do very many anymore. Private labs do that, but it's for people that are on well water or springs or something like that. Most time labs do that anymore, but we still have the ability to do that. So I'm not going to spend any time on that. A couple other things that are useful information that you might run across: needing right of entry forms. We're not going to access a person's property without the owner's consent. Okay, so we have forms to fill out if that's the case. Same way with the power of attorney. We only deal with the owner of that property or their legal designee. And so sometimes we're going to ask you to get a power of attorney form filled out so that we know that we're doing things on behalf of those folks. Talk about the consultants. We have lists on our websites, and these forms are on our website. Listed all these consultants are on our website. So the soil scientists, the engineers, surveyors, all those folks. It's just a list. It's like the yellow pages. We don't recommend them. We don't recommend that you use one over the other. It's a list. It's a service we provide to give you a starting place to look for those folks that do this business. They've asked to be put on that list, okay? So please understand that as well. We have people all the time, well, he's on your approved list, or y'all recommended him. No, it's just a list of people that do that. Now, some of them are approved by us, like the installers, they're licensed by us, okay? Our regulations are on our website. There's policies on our website. There's a lot of that remodel renovation stuff. There's a big policy document on our website that talks about that. It's very good information in it, a lot of general information. I'm giving y'all a bunch of brochures and stuff. Our fee schedules are in there. Some of these brochures have do's and don'ts and how to maintain your septic system. You know, some good information in there. The other thing I'll tell you is 3-4 years ago, IDT, 4 years ago maybe, we went to an online application process in all of community development. It's called IDT Plans. Okay, so here's a website link for it, and it's in that handout I gave you. It's got all these slides in it. That's how you make applications with us. Technical applications, any kind of applications with us. You have to create you have to sign up for it. Submit projects for review. Shauna's our IDT expert. I'm the IDT dummy. I don't know how it works. But any of that information, you can call our office and either Shauna or one of our other clerical staff can help y'all through that process. Okay. And the biggest thing I can tell you is disclosure. And for what y'all do, it is a big thing, because that bottom line, that's what can really actually happen. We can be your best friend or we can be your worst nightmare. And I'm not here to pick sides. It's just the reality. I mean, our deal is, we're here to help you do whatever you need to do. The way I look at it, I tell this to people all the time, whether they believe it or not, you know, we're here to work with you, to help you make sure that you have a good system, you don't have any problems with it. And that's what we all want, because y'all want to keep sell these homes and things like that. But if something's not up to snuff, then we're going to tell people. I'm not an optimist, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. And I will tell people straight up whatever it is. That's kind of our philosophy on that stuff. So I think that's about kind of wraps things up. Yeah.
Okay. Swing way back 50 slides ago.
Okay.
To the planning process.
Yes.
Soil map, soil survey. Does this exist? You got your parcel, they've done the mapping, the testing, the sampling and all that. Can a platted document, for lack of better words, platted approved soil field map exist, and it shows where it is on the property and what it can take, but there's no house plan envelope or anything like that? In my perspective, as us as real estate agents, everybody has a client that wants to buy some land and build a house. And ideally for us, we can say, here has what been approved by the county, and it's going to go right there, and this is what it can take, and here is your platted map.
Okay.
Does it?
Yep. So there's two things. Go back to that same slide, that plat. I'm going to use plat as a generic term, even though it's not. There are two documents. There is a plat of subdivision, okay? And that can be a single lot. Okay, it's not, doesn't have to be a bunch of lots, but it's a plat of subdivision. That plat of subdivision is reviewed by multiple departments. So it's reviewed by the planning and zoning folks, it's reviewed by us, it's reviewed by engineering, and all these folks review it for all their regulations and they approve it and sign it. That document will show septic fields. It will also show minimum building envelope. Okay, so it tells you that you can build your house within that. And so it may show other things. So multiple departments sign it and it's recorded. Okay. The one that we do just for us is called a subsurface sewage disposal system location map. SSDS for short. And then location map. We're the only department that reviews it. It looks the same. Okay. There are differences. We're the only ones that review it. We're the only ones that sign it. And it will show septic fields. It will not show a building envelope. It won't show anything else that the other departments look for. And there will be a disclaimer that says no other county department has reviewed it. There is no guarantee that you can get a building permit.
Okay.
All it does is it designates the septic fields for septic and what they are approved for, and now you have vested rights for the septic, not for building a house. So you got to understand what that document is for.
So for our perspective as agents, this is what we get. Somebody wants to look at some property and you go to the MLS, most of the time, there's nothing. No attachments, no nothing. You're like, okay, we're starting from zero. Sometimes they'll have the preliminary letter. You know, hey, we went out there this day, poked around, it could be this.
Right.
That's like one step up.
Okay.
And I guess for us, value-wise and speed-wise, the next step up would be the county has actually, you guys have actually gone out there and done the sub-sewer. And so here is a map of what the county, you say can exist and where it exists. That's the next step up. But that does not promise you can get a building permit.
No.
And it does not consider anything else,
That's right.
only this.
That's right.
And then the last step up would be the full approved plat.
So let's, hang on, before you go there.
Yeah.
By law, by state law, plats of subdivision are only required under certain circumstances. Okay?
Yeah.
Based on zoning and property size and road frontage and all kinds of things. They're not gonna go to that next step automatically. Say you've got 10 acres, that you will never have a plat of subdivision most likely on that. Okay?
Yeah.
But to get to know, then you need to go talk to the planning and zoning. Hey, what are my limitations? Okay? So there's not always that next step up from location map to plat.
Yeah.
Because there's other state laws that govern how the plats are done.
Okay.
Okay. But like when you mentioned earlier, does it perk? Has it been approved? Does it have septic sites? That's the document you want. It's been signed by the county. It's recorded. It has vested rights. You have approved septic. So you know that you got septic. Most of the time, that's the limiting factor on being able to build on the piece of property. Now, then you got to get into the details of where the house can go and where it can sit. And, you know, there's all kind of zoning regulations on hilltops and steep slopes and cutting down trees. And there's all kind of stuff on limitations. But now you have to start talking to those folks.
When y'all have stamped off on the plat or whatever, there still has to be a permit issued.
That's right. That's right. That's
So
right.
from our perspective, and the permit is not transferable to the next owner, but that might be easy to do.
Mhm.
So our perspective as an agent working with the buyer, the most valuable parcel would be one where you guys have been out there, you've mapped it, stamped it, it's recorded, and the owner has maybe gone ahead and paid for a permit, or maybe not. The permit's got to be paid by whoever builds it
Yeah.
anyway. And so-
Same way, because the next person that buys it, they may want a different house. They may want the house in a different location. They may want the driveway different. So if you have an engineer design the system, they're going to design it for that specific house, where the driveway goes,
Yeah.
all those details. And a new owner may want something a little bit different.
Yeah.
So it can change. The biggest thing I'll tell you on that recorded location map, read the notes.
Yeah.
Okay, there's going to be lots of notes on there, and some of it, you know, might not be important now, but it's going to tell you about, you know, not disturbing it. It's going to tell you how many bedrooms it's approved for. It's going to have the disclosure that says, doesn't mean you get a building permit, no other departments, but you have vested septic rights and all that. It's going to tell you, you know, some of your do's and your don'ts. And it'll have special, sometimes there's a lot of special notes on there. Say there was an existing house, and what you can't, we'll have what we call conditional approval notes. What you can and can't do with that existing house. It'll be spelled out in a big note. This house was built in 1960 and it contains 2 bedrooms, or it contains 4 bedrooms, and the system was only approved for 2. And these are your options that you can either tear it down and rebuild it, or when you have to put in a new one. There'll be lots of notes about that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of good information on there about what you can and can't do on the property. So read that document. And then if you have questions, call and ask. And if a buyer has questions, have them call and ask. Have their agent call and ask. That's what we're there for.
And that document is specifically called,
A subsurface sewage disposal system location map.
okay,
So subsurface sewage disposal system, SSDS,
Yeah.
that's the big fancy word for septic system.
Yeah.
So legally, we have to use that word, and it's a location map. It's a septic system location map. And that's all it is. But it's a very important piece of document. But again, it's just, it's one piece of the puzzle. And then take that information, and then if there's more questions, that's what we're here for. That's where you need to call and talk to us on the front end. And don't just tell someone or assume someone can do certain things. Call and ask.
that's where we can educate our, whether on the selling side or the buying side is, how many times have you sold someone want to write up something and they're like, well, I'm gonna write a contingent upon a 4-bedroom approval, from Williamson County to build. I'm like, well, honey, that could take, a long time. And the sellers may not be willing to give you the adequate time to find that out.
What they want in that description is that location map.
Location map.
That's what they want.
Right.
And we do a bunch of them because people want the county's approval that they have septic approval. And and they will call us, they'll want assurances. That is the only document that our office will give you. We will not give you any other thing in writing. Not gonna happen.
It makes the parcel more valuable.
It most certainly does.
Because if it doesn't exist, it's a crapshoot.
It's exactly right. So that document, even though it may take a while, it adds a ton of value to that piece of property.
And if they don't do it, then they need to also have the expectation, hey, we gotta give these buyers the time.
That's right.
Have the confidence in knowing what they're buying,
And that's part of me trying to educate y'all on realistic on timeframes. And I hear it all the time, I've got a closing in 2 weeks. That's not my problem. I hate to be blunt, but the closing date doesn't affect me at all. It doesn't affect our staff. It doesn't affect those consultants. I mean, we got hundreds of projects in there, and I'm going to treat everyone fairly. I don't care who you are. We're going to look at the ones that come in first and the order they come in. And that's the only way that I know to do it, to be fair to everyone. And so if you have to adjust closings, then you need to do that. But those expectations, the realistic expectations really need to be managed. And so, if someone says, I got to get moved in, you need to be able to tell them, okay, but realistically, you need to know that we're not going to have that document by the end. Because it's going to take me a month to get a soil scientist out there. It's going to take me 2 months to get a surveyor out there, and the county's 2 months behind. It is what it is. But if you know that, what I found out is if people know that on the front end, they might not like that, but they're okay with that because they know.
It is what it is.
It is, but they know. It's when they don't know and they think it's something else, or they've been promised it's something else and that's not reality, that's when people get mad. Now, do I wish we could do things faster on our end? Sure. I wish I could hire 10 more people. But, I'm not the only people in the county that needs help, and it's a big county and lots of people, and we're doing the best we can do.
Okay.
And 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, we were in a recession and people were begging for jobs. I mean,
So
it's unprecedented what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, we got a couple questions online, and then we're gonna have to wrap this up because we're going on 2.5 hours, and I'm sure you've got places to be. Where can they find the form online? I think someone was on the website but was having trouble locating it.
If you go to the county website first, and then you'll go to the link for sewage disposal management, and then so that's our department site, and then on the left-hand side there'll be some pull-down menus. I think one of them says forms and handouts, and you click on it, and then you should see a bunch of different things that you can
Excellent. What are your thoughts about realtors giving the advice to buyers to always get a system pumped before purchasing?
I don't know that it's always necessary. My first question was, when was the last time it was pumped?
There you go. I think that was a follow-up. Do you need to have it pumped regularly or serviced?
Yes. So we recommend every 3 to 5 years. So if the seller had it pumped a year ago, well, doesn't necessarily need to be pumped, but you can have it pumped. Sure. It's not going to hurt anything. But I wouldn't make it a requirement.
So not a requirement, not really a recommendation, but knowing when it was done last is always good. Okay.
So 3 to 5 years. If they say it hadn't been pumped in 10 years, I'd get it pumped. Yep.
Awesome. Anything else, you guys? We got a few more minutes till we hit 12:30.
I'll say now, Brian, we are very appreciative.
That was huge. Lots of compliments.
Thank you. Well, I hope y'all get something out of it. Again, we're a resource. We're here to help you. We're here to help the owners.
Do you mind to put your information slide back up? That way, your information slide. That way, the people, if they do have follow-up questions, they can shoot you an email.
Go all the way back.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, all the way to the back. He's going to put his information up, you guys.
And I think my card's in the handouts.
Yeah, I think yeah, they do have a copy of the slides too, just in case. And your information's on that. So any follow-up questions?
There we go.
Awesome, sweet. Lots of compliments, excellent, so helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
We appreciate you.
Anytime.
You might be back again.
That's all right. As long as people value the information and learn
Yes,
something from it.
absolutely,
It
absolutely.
matters, man, I'm telling you.
Yeah, big deal.
Awesome.
thank y'all for
All right,
everybody's
guys,
Yeah, we
well.
appreciate you again, Brother Brian. Thank you, sir.
Question, is this recorded? Yes, we did get permission to record. I'm gonna get this over to my communications director this week for her to maybe just kind of make sure everything looks right, if she needs to edit on the front or end, and then we'll post it to our YouTube channel. So if you're not following our YouTube channel, you want to find that. Again, hopefully in the next week or two, we'll have this up, but we do appreciate you letting us
Yeah.
record for members that couldn't have joined
No
us.
problem.
But yeah, you guys, we're done. Brian's info, if you have any other questions, we really appreciate you guys.
Taking our calls.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like you're a very busy lady.
As the office manager.
So just be patient with us. We're still short.
Yes, we
Yeah.
we are still short staffed, and the office is still closed
Yeah.
to the
As
general
much
public.
time as you can give us a breakage request is much appreciated.
Oh, yes. As with everything, right? As much time as you can give, we appreciate it. Awesome. Well, you guys were all done. You guys are welcome to log off. We will try to get this posted as fast as we can.
Sure, okay,
It's got a cold, by the way.
that's okay.
So, we bought this property and we're gonna build. The building envelope is going to be where the existing septic is.
Okay,
Can we put the new septic system in, tie in and live there while we build the house?
what's there now, the existing house?
That's-
Manufactured.
Yeah, there's a manufactured envelope on top of the building, the septic is directly behind it. And we're gonna build where the existing septic is.
There's probably a way to do that. There's probably lots of details I need to kind of look at first.
Elliot came out
Okay.
with the younger gentleman, I don't remember his name.
Can we,
Probably.
Maybe.
okay,
They came out and they were just checking behind Mike
okay,
to check on everything. So
okay.
he was gonna get back to him, but I haven't heard from him. I gave him a card.
Tell you what, let me get something to scribble on.
Do you have a property address?
Yeah, 3751 Mobley's Cut Road. Yeah, since you're a captive to that, I'm just going to ask you in person.
So you'll be the one that we meet with.
Probably not, probably me.
He's a head leader.
31,
3751.
3751.
Yeah.
Mom, they sent your soil map. I was looking it up at IDT. They sent your soil map back to Mike Harbauer on the 6th.
Awesome. So it's approved or?
You can, hey.
It's Lisa and Henry Walker.